those Pridefuls off is going to save you a lot of time, especially on this 18 scenario where they have probably about 500,000 HP. If you don't have to single target those down, you don't have to worry about doing a lot of damage and save a lot of time over the course of the dungeon. Also, it's not really too viable to pull that with trash packs unless you know you have all your cooldowns up. So look forward to seeing a lot of Shadow Melds skipping past those Pridefuls.
Yeah, and the beautiful use here of that Ring of Peace to make sure now resets at Necrotic, because we do have Necrotic in this dungeon, and it looked like it was basically non-existent here on the first pull. We do see now playing Kyrian, so he does have this Kyrian vial available to him, which also removes the Necrotic effect, which is actually pretty handy, but probably didn't have it ready for this pull, so we saw the Ring of Peace coming out to make sure he can reset it. Very nicely done, as they are now proccing that second Pride mob, and this time they decided to finish off the Pride. They also don't have Shadow Melt available at this point in time. It's still on cooldown, so that's probably why they decided to finish it off here.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I mean, having the Prideful for that first boss might be useful as well, because, you know, the Tyrannical boss does take a lot of time to get through, so that might be one of the only ones we'll see them pull, or they're just going to go for another massive pull, and that 30% damage buff will help them out a lot here.
Yeah, we see one of those inspired mobs, this Houndmaster is inspired. They're just running through, taking it with them. It might, actually no, they incapped it, as you can see. Maris actually used one of his artisans to incap on that Houndmaster to make sure the inspired aura is not applied to the rest of the mobs here. So they're pulling the shard plus all of this trash together. They do have the Pride buff, that's why you see this huge amount of damage coming in by them. They just off healing the shards AoE cast, the Thrash. Usually you could outrange it, but of course they do have melee, 2 melee even, so that's not a possibility for them. So they're just out healing that damage, making sure they just everything down. And it looks like they're skipping this Pride and also that Houndmaster.
Нормально, танчит такая десятка в пачку.
Coming out, they're skipping that one as they're moving on to the boss. Well, on the other side, we do see
Жесть какая.
fighting that second Pride mob as well. They do not have the option to skip this, as they have a Holy Paladin, which cannot be a Night Elf at all, so no possibility of Shadow Melting off that Pride.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, that's going to be a huge time loss for them. Like, each of those probably still takes about 20 to 30 seconds, even with the gear that they have on these tournament realms, so really not great to not have Shadow Melt on every single one of your members for those. And you can see the difference here. Echo's already pulled the boss.
Да нет, так это понятно было, что очень сильно здорово.
Percentage as well up on the screen here in the middle. You see Echo is on 63%. They actually pulled some trash on top of this boss here. Everything is just moving so quickly for them.
Что-то я не вижу этих аффиксов.
Well, Quad question mark, they are on 62%. So they're just basically one pull behind. I think it's literally just the difference of the Pride mobs that they had to play, right? Because the buff that you gain from the Pride mob just does not make, it doesn't give you such a time gain that would make up for the time that you lose for finishing off the Pride itself. And it's just inefficient for this setup here for the speed running, because they cannot really pull anything on top of the Pride mob because it's such a huge amount of damage coming out of it. And
also having to
dodge those abilities as well, the debuff to the Pride, and it just makes it not efficient.
Oh yeah, for
У
sure.
них одинаковые сетапы, что ли? А нет, у этих монаха нет.
Team question mark is actually pulling ahead of Echo purely off the back of that Holy Paladin damage. The Ashen Hollow plus the wings is just doing it.
Эхо с монахом, а эти чуваки справа без. Честно, почему они ММ-ханта не взяли вместо мага? Типа под физ сетап с этим, с монахом. Хотя они завтра, они, наверное, должны больше шарить.
Which doesn't really matter on a boss because the boss is not seeable anyway, so they can just nuke it down for efficiency, getting a little bit extra percentage again while fighting the boss at the same time. We do have this one death still.
А, у них, я вижу, один аффикс, это элитные мобы вот эти в пачке. Которых нельзя станет ничего делать.
Both 79% trash, both just finished off that boss. So it's actually Quad question mark that is ahead at this point because they have the extra time, but because they have 0 deaths.
Well, the question is as well, they're going to have to deal with these groundskeepers to proc that 4th Prideful, and they will have to kill that Prideful off before moving on to the second boss, whereas Echo can just go straight to the boss.
Фаермаг, что пачки сносит как сумасшедший, это понятно.
I think the Shadow Meld advantage is still helping them out here a lot, and they're going to be pretty far ahead after we get through this second boss. But it is nice to see that you know, this
И
meta
уже
now
второго
isn't
босса
necessarily
фигарит, эти
100% the
только
best
про
at
это
everything.
лупят.
You're seeing question mark put up a pretty good fight here.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this one shadow mount they just got there really gave them a huge advantage as they're now already fighting
Ну я
Echelon,
хазадры по ПЦ.
while question mark has to deal with this pride as you mentioned. Echelon itself, there's not much you can do on top of it. Like you can't really pull any trash on top unless you feel fancy because the door is actually closed to the next room, so you can't pull any of the other trash back.
То есть тут чуваки скипнули ада, здесь нет. Типа пока разница того, что делают.
And we also see it skipped here on the MDI just because it seems very inefficient. It's pretty dangerous as well. We have a bunch of frontals, a bunch of casts that need to be interrupted. So usually teams choose to skip it, which we see from both teams as well here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can see the big difference here right now. 30% on that second boss just from having to kill the Pride off for team question mark. Echo is just using
Что-то качество говна периодически на ютубе. Хотя это 1080 качество. Жизнь задрана магию, выпрыгнул оттуда, чтобы дэмэдж от босса не получить. Машина без крыши. А, это паладин, наверное, у чуваков, да, справа? Да, это паладин. То есть у них ДК, паладин, фаермаг. У них хил... А, нет, это не прот, это хил типа паладин у них. По спам. Я не могу просто понять, это паладин, типа чуваков, или это какой-то хил, типа что-то ДЦ приста. Вопросиков. А, не, это холик, все нормально. Типа их вывели на большой экран, я вижу, что там, да. Значок холика. Здорово, нормально.
As well as just do massive AoE damage with those spinning crank kick stacks and that dancing GG proc that's really powerful. This expansion is helping them out quite a bit. So the overall damage, I would not be surprised if we see at the end of the dungeon the monk to be way higher than that Shadow Priest.
Yeah, would not be surprised about that one for sure. As the Echo did now finish off the boss, they're moving on to the next room. We do see one inspired Houndmaster again here in this room. Let's see how to deal with that one. Looks like they're just immediately pulling everything to that boss. So they're now engaging that third boss with all of the trash on top of it. This seems incredibly dangerous, not only because you have all of this trash plus the boss, but you also have the inspired aura here. So that means two inspired mobs, none of these adds can actually...
Жесть какая, они спулили всю пачку с боссом. Это если что 18-й ключ.
He also used that Kyrian vial, it looked like, to get rid of that necrotic stack on him. And now on the other side, Quad question mark doing this exact same pull.
Честно, да, решили дать шанс молодым. Какие-то эхо там, вот это все.
The fact that they have that Shadow Priest, and I haven't checked on the gear thing, but he could be running the PI legendary as well, which will let him PI both himself and a target. So that's one benefit of having the Shadow Priest in the group comp. That's really going to be the only major difference because he can PI that Holy Paladin during his cooldowns and have him do a lot of damage. You can see how much the Holy Paladin is doing once again here on this poll, by the way.
Yeah.
Keeping up with the Shadow Priest. That's just the strength of the Paladin. It's just really unfortunate that they don't have access to that Shadow.
Wow, fireball сюда.
Yeah, that's true. Do you actually know if the mind control from the Venthyr, if you mind control the gargoyles with the Venthyr Covenant, does that actually...
Это КДПС, да? Это какие-то лайтовые ребята.
So with details, there's a little bit of a weird interaction with that. If you mind control the gargoyle out of combat, it'll show on details.
Это, кстати, Гингил, про которого вчера дрофлили как раз в конфе. Самый лютый задр в эхо. На маге тупо разваливает.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, people completely underestimate the damage of Paladin right now. Like in our raids, one of our Paladins running that setup can actually do more burst damage than any other class in the game inside of a 1-minute window. It's ridiculous how much damage Holy Paladin can do with this exact setup. But it doesn't have Shadow Meld, so in the Mythic Plus MDI scenario, it really isn't going to be that much of an advantage. That being said, they are very close behind Echo.
У них жесткий сетап, у них типа ДЦ.
Gonna be the difference again is this shadow meld, right? Because
Они будут пытаться бурстить его.
Here they have the 5 seconds advantage in their favor, but they're gonna be triggering that last pride from this mini boss, and they just won't have a way of dodging the pride. Well, and I mean it's very unlikely that they're gonna get the advantage back from the
Это стрим стрима, да, при этой
enigma.
Вообще стоит, наверное, указать типа ссылку на оригинал, чтобы не было докапов никаких. Но я думаю, всем насрать плюс-минус.
As they're now moving on as well into this room, it looks like they're doing the line of sight. It's not really the line of sight strategy. They're just nuking the mini boss in between the heals. So this mini boss casts a heal where he just channels on those neutral mobs, and depending on if there's any neutral mobs still alive, he will just gain HP.
На самом деле лучше сделаем, чтобы вам Twitch вообще поплавленный же стал. Так, сделаем.
Yep, for sure. I mean, they're both able to pull it off. It looks like here, so that's one entire mini boss. They pretty much don't have to worry about none of those ads in that room.
Так, и все, дальше стрим смотрим.
But of course, Team Question Mark will have to deal with that prideful, but they're probably going to go for that.
Почему они, интересно, не взяли ханта?
They'll just pull the prideful with the boss and cleave it down.
Ну хотя, вряд ли хант может 50к, да, в пачку давать, или может? Ну, первая часть легко для эхо, походу. На 25% босса хп выигрывает. Кстати, Прайд убивает вместе с этим, с боссом. Not only the debuffs, but also the ads. But there we go, the Pride is down, so now they can nuke the boss. And you see the damage difference, I mean the HP difference here at the bottom. It is still really close. It is a tyrannical environment, so of course the difference... А, у этих сейчас 13 секунд еще БЛ откатится у Эхо. Ну тут легко... А, хотя нет, там 50 хп на 66. Сейчас 4 секунды БЛ будет. Поехали.
But the lust is also not coming out for Echo. So, man, this is going to end up being a really close DPS race here at the end. And like you mentioned, Question Mark does have that 5-second advantage, which could easily be the 6% behind they are on the boss right now.
Выживаемость ханта и бурст урона, я понял. Ну, вообще, да, там же кэмбурст у мага сумасшедший.
A little bit ahead in burst damage here in a second once Gingy has his combustion up. There we go, combustion is being popped, and it looks like the boss is melting at this point. I'm not sure if Quad Question Mark can make up for this. This 5 seconds is probably just not going to be enough, as Lord Chamberlain is going down for Echo, and we're counting on 5 seconds. I don't think this is going to be enough. They're just running out of damage at this point, but so close. Wow.
Ну, хотя, кстати, да, 10% хп всего, то есть это где-то секунд 15. Прикольно.
Yeah, that was one of the closest games I've seen, and it was between a first seed and an 8th seed. It was our first game of the season. That is really, really a treat. Great to see that. Hopefully that's setting the stage for a lot of games like that this season.
Absolutely. And you know that Echo's got to be absolutely thrilled about that as well. I mean, very minimal deaths. It's their first time back.
Да, но они там типа обосрались с этим, с Прайдом, я так понимаю, в начале. Там типа был момент, где эти скипнули, а Прайд. Эхо. А эти чуваки нет. Может, если, кстати, они скипнули бы Прайда, может, тоже бы догнали их. Можно какой-то фигне пострадать до следующей карты. Что можно поделать? Тут роба есть у нас любимая.
Интересно, какие там перерывы будут на трансляции. Кстати, да, там смертельная тризна, по-моему, next. Это будет интересно. Смертельная тризна. Можно пока фигней пострадать чисто. В альтабе поглядываю, как начнется следующая карта, пойдем смотреть. Не, мне ничего не падает. К сожалению или к счастью. Я персонаж голый. Ну, фул 3 КД в героике, потом еще и плюс 2 без динатрия, то есть это 5 КД без 2 динатриев. И нету шмота, это прям что-то совсем плохо. Семнадцатые ключи, да, и пулить босса вместе с 3 пачками бобов. Там какой-то реплей, как заливали Халкиуса босса вместе с пачками мобов. Что будет? Не все. Пати куда? В 16-18 ключи? А, ну, кстати, ты имеешь в виду по классам? Ну да. Идеальный сетап. Поехали. Ну да, Шакен или Нео танчит, и получается такой сетап как раз. Еще, кстати, интересно, они будут типа персонажей каждой карте подбирать, или как это работает? Или типа вот они выбрали, например, сетап, и он на все будет карты у них теперь. Им там 226 шмот, кстати, выдали. То есть у них там работает это все так, что типа тебе дают персонажа на MDI. И ты типа выбираешь шмотки. Там типа вендор стоит. И ты фул выбираешь у него шмот, набор 226, который захочешь. Там, наверное, такие... Ну, там, по сути, идеальный персонаж получается у тебя. Там можно покайфовать, поиграть. Даже если не пойдет, например, на победку. Что будет? Вообще... Хотя там чё, день и ночь, наверное, ключи задрачивали. Они и так себе персонажа такого собрали, плюс-минус. Как они нам бесконечно везет. Чё там?
100 HP each, so anybody can just look at them for half a second and take them out. But the question is, who in your group is going to be doing it? So I'm interested to see.
Ну и обсуждают, что-то показали карты, которые будут следующие, да. Смертельная тризна, а потом что-то еще будет. Не успел посмотреть. Без финала, без холи приста, я думаю, они не справятся, так что... Можно об этом даже не говорить было. Но они карты быстро закрываются. Я думал, типа, будет подольше посмотреть, как там что вообще происходить будет. Чего карту за 11.05 пробежали. Вы можете тормознуть-то хоть на секунду? Как там? А, там... Я понял, они сидят тавк, типа развлекают народ, пока люди летят к тризне. По-моему, кстати, это не тризна сейчас будет, а чумные каскады. Сложно, но так... Я тоже, когда, типа, зашел в WoW, думал, что есть, типа, ну, как обычно, типа, в ММОшках прям совсем бесполезные персонажи, на которых ты... Ну, нет смысла их создавать и тратить на это время. А есть какие-то, ну, плюс-минус имбухи, что-то типа того, на которых все играют. А получилось так, что, типа, актуал сейчас выглядит так, что ты можешь... Ну, практически на любом персонаже играть. Потому что здесь, типа, 70% всех приколов, они завязаны на шмотках. Если сейчас Глизгоу будет, это будет кайф. О, поехали.
18 keys as well. The amount of damage that these teams have just makes them ignore some of those affixes on those bigger pools. So I think it's going to be very similar with Raging. When we have other affixes like maybe Spiteful, they might have to be a little bit more careful, because if they start killing off some of those smaller HP mobs and the Spitefuls start spawning out, they could very well get one-shot. So definitely an affix that maybe not, that won't be as easy, but we don't have that one here.
Когда альтаба чекаю ОБС, чем экран чисто становится.
Oh yeah, and getting right into it with a huge triple pull right off the bat, you're going to have to keep an eye on those Fungus Storm casts here, because if you let too many of those go off, especially in the Raging Affix, these teams will wipe instantly. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that grip sigil just now coming out from now there, and they're going to have to make sure they have a stun, probably from their Windwalker Monk on either side as well, which will help them out. But we didn't even talk about the comp changes here. Jeeth has swapped from that Paladin to a Priest, and Curry has swapped from the Priest over to a Windwalker Monk, so a much more meta comp coming out from them.
Yeah, so they're running the exact same comp here. We don't see any changes at all. So no hunters, additionally no druids, so they do not have any way of getting rid of that raging effect, which, you know, probably means what we just said earlier, that
Чуваки справа поменяли сетап.
looks like
they decide to play the Pride mob here on Echo side, as they already procced it. A huge
Эх, тем
pull
же
with
бы
a
играет, да, там
21%
чуваки
trash
свапнулись.
in that very first pull. While Quad Question Mark on the other side,
Взяли
they
себе
opened up
монаха
at
тоже.
11% and are now doing a second pull. So definitely a much bigger pull
Монк,
happened
маг,
on Echo side as they're now
ДК.
dealing with that Pride. Interesting to see that they're not choosing to skip this specific one, since they are all Night Elves, meaning they could just shadow
Ну,
meld it
танчит
off. But
Демон
decided not
Хантер,
to.
понятно, а типа кто у них
Yeah, and I
хил, я
wonder
не
if
могу
this means
понять.
they're going to go for this
По
massive pull where
обилкам.
they just pull everything in this room into the boss.
Это
That
ДЦ,
would be
что
the
ли,
only way
тоже?
I see
Yeah.
them going for that damage and healing buff.
Они типа
I'm
скопировали
interested to see if
сетап
they're gonna pull
просто.
it off here, but we're going to look at Team Question Mark also going for it. Well, they didn't go for quite the similar first pull here as well. They definitely cut it in two quite a bit. But now is setting up to pull the boss here, and they're not pulling any of the trash in the room.
Дорога
They're opting to pull
докопались.
absolutely none of it. They're just going straight to the boss and killing on that tiny little island there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, this might be decently difficult since it is tyrannical. And
Задоджили всех мобов, вытащили
But it looks like
с
they're just getting
Клизга
knocked to this other side.
одного.
And I actually thought this boss might just reset if you drag him this far away, but apparently not. They can just tank it on the side here.
Проще. Ну вообще прикольно, кстати, он их толкает. И они типа в стенку в это врезаются. Когда их Склизгл толкает, никто не разлетается.
Which, yeah, very interesting to see that they figured this out, that it doesn't reset and they can just tank it here. Well, on the other side,
Большую слизь законтролили, а мелкая где? А, мелкая вон ползет.
It looked like they pulled a mob that they weren't supposed to pull, one of those plague rocks. I assume at least they didn't want to, and that's why they had some issues there.
Слизь на мелкую покс. Чуть покрутили и все.
So completely different strategies coming out from those two teams.
Well, the boss just healed just now for Echo as well. They let some of those slimy morsels come in and hit the boss, so he healed.
Ну прикольно, они типа двух милишников ставят так, чтобы они типа врезались в стенку и не отлетали далеко от босса. То есть вот сейчас бам, и они не разлетелись. 5 чего в одной точке до сих пор стоит. Здесь какие-то мемные вещи происходят, куча бам. Куча слизняков хуярится за все. Да, тут с одной стороны люди турнир играют, с другой виклик закрывают.
Which is a pretty big annoyance because they don't give any percentage, of course, as they are part of this Plague Belcher. That means that you don't necessarily want to waste the damage on them, but if you don't have any good CCs, then they go through, as we can see here, and just heal the Belcher and give him a damage increase. So very annoying to deal with if you don't have anything like a Mass Root or a Fierce Sigil coming in. So now we do see the Frost Nova.
Блин, какая мемная ситуация на самом деле. Там чуваки уже босса убили, бежали дальше. Но им проценты нужно брать. Ну типа процентов меньше. На 6 сейчас. Даже больше, чем на 6.
We might even have to see Team Question Mark deal with 2 or not 3, but definitely 2 sets of ads on this boss, whereas Echo is just moving on ahead with the rest of the dungeon. Now I'm interested to see what they plan on doing here for trash. If they're just going to pull it all together and AoE it all down instantly, or if they plan on using some of those sort of
Если здесь справа законтролили, одну захексили, вторую так. 2 фиолетовых, кстати, которые урон режут. Остальное крутит. Прикольно.
From just getting this extra damage, but if it's easy to set up and the mobs are just right next to it, then it's definitely worth it, and we saw them just do it right there. We did see the double CC come in for this 2 mob pack group, just because
там аффиксы, походу, меняются каждый данж, что ли. Типа я увидел сейчас сферку, которая вот это, если не разбиваешь, взрывается. Вон сферка эксплосив, которую на милишниках заколебаешься просто.
A problem dealing with this trash pack, but he did now recover and they're moving on. We see the Pride pulled as well. Okay, so this is actually.
Мне интересно понять, типа у них боссы сильные или кто?
And they're also shadow melting off the Pride at the same time. Looks like they're doing even a bigger skip here, where they also skip those tentacles as well.
Right, so they're not only shadow melding the Prideful, but they're also shadow melding all the tentacles. They're shadow melding all of the slimes that spawn from the large ad when it dies, because those transform. I think you have to wait until they transform in order to shadow meld them off, because they have global aggro. If they do transform, but they will.
Что происходит? Они что-то щупальца скипнули одно. Второе что-то плюется по кому-то.
Trash count for the boss, but You know, I don't know if they actually want that, because usually you want to just skip the Prideful again with Shadow.
А, они убили босса, типа.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Franklin's actually going down here on their side.
Пришлось
And it looks
убивать.
like Quad Question Mark has even
А, нет,
more
этот чел
issues
за
as
ним бежит.
they also have some deaths on their side. They have some blobs going through on the boss as well. Looks like this might just be a whole wipe for Quad Question Mark, unfortunately. Now, we do see on Echo's
Там
side,
чуваки с
they don't
Клизгой до
have
сих пор
Fragments
хуярят.
back up at the moment because Fragments is the DK. He is the one with the battle rest.
Ну да,
So they
что-то.
might just have to finish this off and get him up. But now it's going down too. This might have
Там
might
купон,
present
походу,
even more problems,
в
and they
другом
don't have
составе.
Shadowmount available because
Там
they
люди
just
на
missed it,
Склизгле
so they
сдохли.
can't actually de-aggro and get a rest out. They did manage to finish off most of the important mobs here, so they might be able to
Прочь.
fight this out, but it's only Gingy and Sally
Что
alive
тебя
at this
Склизгого
point.
расхуярил.
And they don't have Shadow Meld because they just used it, so
Yeah,
this is going to
he's
be really
Sally has
unfortunate.
as well.
He's completely yeah. Maybe he's going to try to die in a good spot, and then Jinji can battle res him with the engineering item if he gets the invisibility off.
Что они пытаются
That
сделать?
might be the
А,
play, or
они
Jinji's just
типа
trying to deal with
юзают
it on his own. He's off screen right now, so we
инвиз
can't quite
этих.
see what he's doing, but it looks like
Они типа за аликов, я так
Just
понял.
died.
И они все типа эльфийский инвиз жмут,
Looks like
Looks
they're good
like
now.
Sally. I'm not sure if he's still in combat.
чтобы мобы
or-
отагривались.
He's definitely waiting, so he might be in combat
Да,
here,
то есть он
otherwise
типа
he
в
would be
соло
wrestling
выжил,
or
отагрил
something.
всех
So it
мобов,
looks like there's still, yeah, there's this
Инвизом.
one Lightweaver is still alive, and he's raging as well.
Пытается
He
чела
cannot get rid of the
добить.
raging
Oh,
effect.
no.
This,
Майндбластом его
even a
сюда.
time save at this point,
Не.
but I'm sure they called it
С
on their
майтами.
voice channel for Sally to finish this
Кары
off.
ему,
They
кары
seem
туда.
to be thinking that this is going to be a time save. We do see the Shadow Fiend as well by Sally, just basically soloing this mob at this point. So
Looks like
Sally
he
did a
got
very
it.
good
Соло
job
для
line of
ДЦ.
sight. Yeah, he got it. So
Всё,
now he
резай
can get the
друзей.
mass rest off. Well done by the rest of the team here, making sure they kite out this mini boss, sorry, and actually managed to finish it off. So well done. It took a little bit of time, but they did
То есть
manage.
они скипнули
They
прайд
did
опять.
manage, and like you mentioned as well, it might not
Типа
have
они
been
этого
the
красного
best
моба
thing for
вообще
them
не
to do,
бьют,
because at
который
some
баф
point you
дает.
have to realize that
Но
you
его
just have
долго
to
бить,
skip it.
и тебе нужно,
Full
чтобы его
wipe
быстро
back.
убить, типа
But maybe with how
камбушки
limited the boss
слить
was, they
свои,
decided
ну,
that it just be better
прожимки
for them to
какие-то,
try to
там
finish it off,
двухминутки,
even though it
одноминутки.
cost them the extra couple of deaths.
И по
There,
сути
they were
это не
able to
стоит того,
just barely
потому
get
что
through
ты
it.
убиваешь
And
время,
that's one of
плюс
the qualities
большую
of this
часть
team, this particular Echo team, previously
прайда
with
ты
Eduardo, previously
бежишь,
Method EU. They've
еще
just
они
always been really
бьешь.
good at making the
Обычно
best
он
of
так
the
рисуется
scenario. They're
криво.
able to just kind
Или,
of
то
eke out
есть,
pulls even if things go
Эхо
wrong.
второй
And,
уже
good to see that has
данж, они
potential.
просто скипают его и кайфуют.
Yeah, definitely well done here to make sure
принципе,
that they
молодцы.
recover from this tragic death here by
Ну тут они
Fragments,
типа
and
с
then
трех
now
островов
right
мобов
afterwards,
собрали.
now they do see
Тоже
a pretty
жестко.
big pull here. I think they pulled all of the trash from all three
Слизь
platforms
фиолетовую
together.
за
They did
контроль не дали им
incap the
подойти.
congealed slime, which is the slime that gives the damage reduction aura,
Задры
so they don't want to
попытаться.
deal with that one. They might just okay. Looks like they're attacking it now, maybe on top of the pride as well. Yes, looks like they're dealing with the pride here. While G and the Quad Question Mark group, they're having some issues with the first boss. It looked like they didn't manage to finish it off, so now they have a full reset. They have to try again, which
У
just
Эхо
means that there's no way
60%,
for them to
убитый
catch up
босс.
to Echo at this moment
У
in
чуваков
time.
с
There really
Клизгова
was a chance for
хуярит
them
и
to catch up once Echo had this issue with the
34%.
skip. But
Жесть, как
because
же
Quad Question
грустно.
Mark had the same issues on their first boss pool, having this full team
С
wide,
Клизгова вин.
just means that the amount of time that Echo lost was less than the amount of time that Quad Question Mark lost, and therefore Echo is still fairly in the lead,
А,
not only
вот, кстати, показали
loss-wise
этих.
and time-wise in the dungeon, but also percentage-wise.
Аффиксы.
And 5 deaths
Тираника.
difference in favor of Echo
В
as well.
энрейдже мобы на лоу
Yeah, and you
хп.
can see that these guys
Шарики
really don't
высираются,
usually
которые
put DPS
взрываются,
cooldowns
ну
on
и
the Pride
прайд.
right now. Zalia is definitely screaming at his DPS to finish it off. But now they have Lust, they have all of their cooldowns and a 30% damage buff as well as they get into this boss. And on top of that, they also have that haste aura from the red blob. You can see it on the ground there. Gives you 25% haste to deal with this boss as well. And it looks like Gingy's actually saving the combust, maybe to try to phase a little bit faster. Just now popped it. Now, having Prideful for
Сейчас
this boss actually
переведут,
makes sense versus
чтобы он
other bosses in
прыгнул.
the dungeon, because if you're able to double phase this boss quickly enough, you won't have to deal
Там
with
маг
either of
про
the two
каст не
slimes.
нажимает свой.
And
Да, он
that'll save you
перепрыгнет,
a
вот сейчас
lot of
камбурс
time on
будет
this boss,
походу.
but I'm not really sure if they're going to be able to do that on 18 Tyrannical.
They might just have to deal. Looks like they're dealing with the
Или у него
first
когда
big bomb.
камбурс.
Yeah, okay. So they are switching to the first bomb, but
Combo.
they're very likely not going to deal with the second one. The congealed slime did
Oh,
get
fireball
knocked
is
out
so
by
big.
one of the players, and then incapped by Maris, so they don't have to deal with that aura, the damage aura reduction, and they can just focus on the blob. And now the boss, the explosives are being dealt with easily. Looks like even on those really big pulls,
We just barely
Прости,
saw any of those
Купон, мы все
explosives
понимаем.
at all. They
Когда
just
склизгу не
immediately being
можешь
dealt with by the melee players,
преодолеть.
it looks like. And
Даже на
defensively
турнире
also now,
склизгу
and
win.
Zelia are helping with those explosives. Not an issue for these teams at all now with the less HP that they have, which just makes it a lot easier for them to kill it. And now we see them facing the boss very soon, and then we'll see if they actually manage to finish off the boss before, without even having to go on the blob, or if they have to switch.
I mean, they've got all their cooldowns up. They've got Combust up in a sec.
Yeah.
They've got Power Infusion ready. Miraz has both Weapons of Order, Tiger, and 2 stacks of Storm Earth and Fire up. They should be able to burn this boss, no problem. The only major issue is
Ну
going to be
тут
if that
без
purple
шансов,
slime
конечно.
gets in on top of the boss and gives it that damage reduction aura. But it's instantly knocked out by Zelia.
Там челики
Yeah, well
No,
done there.
Mirali.
They needed, just
на
not
5 смертей у них
coming out
больше, у
in
них
crease,
вайп был.
making sure they fear sigil it as well out there to
Плюс
not
они
having to
отстают
deal
уже
with
на
that at
одного
all,
босса,
and now
грубо
they're
говоря.
finishing
Там
off
только у
the
Слизга
boss, but
упал,
it
здесь
looks
уже
like it's
доктор
actually kinda
отъезжает.
close. It is close to exploding here, as you can see on the cast bar below that bomb. So yeah, that was decently close. It looks like it's on Tyrannical,
Сосает
on
Слизгу.
Tyrannical 18 key. It's definitely not as easy as it might be in a 45. So you really want to make sure you have those offensive cooldowns ready to make sure you finish off the boss before that bomb goes off.
Что они здесь
But they
делать
did
будут?
manage, and now they're moving
Будут
on to the
добивать,
next
интересно.
area. Looks like they're even fooding up first. They probably know they're ahead at this point, so they're just playing
Подхавываются.
it safe, making sure they have everything available to them, are as strong as possible to not have any further mistakes here, because that's the only thing that would make them lose this dungeon at this point, right? Making any sort of mistakes or having any sort of
вот они
full
как.
lives.
Man, that's
Они
like
типа берут пак.
that's a pretty big BM, man.
Ну
Going
там,
for the
кстати,
full
можно
10 second
щупальца
debuff on
сагрить.
everyone in your mid-dungeon. And like you said, yeah, they probably know how ahead they are, because they're definitely
Обычно чуваки, которые пошли бы сюда, надо уже щупальца сагривать бы, еще какая-то хрень происходит.
So, yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense. It makes this next room a lot safer. These ambushers in this next room can be very deadly on your tank, especially in this Raging Affix, so wouldn't be surprised to see a
Справа
lot of
паука
cooldowns pop
берут.
on these next few pulls, but
Еще двух.
gonna make a little offshoot for a
Два
little more trash
пака.
percentage here.
Yeah, looks like they're dealing with some of the trash on the side here. There's quite a lot of trash in this area just sitting there on the side. Some of them are fighting each other, so some of them might actually be low HP already when you engage them, which makes it pretty efficient to deal with it. On live keys, we don't see this trash pulled that often, but we definitely do see some routes where people make sure to deal with those. We do have those defenders, Defender of Many Eyes, which
Бодвас
can be
сейчас
annoying because
будет.
they cast quite a few abilities that slow
Бодвас
you
не
down, like
нажимали.
this bubble that reduces
Там
damage.
чуваков
But it
опять
can just
сдох
be
ДК.
this bulwark, there it is.
Это я,
It
что
can
ли,
be
пошел,
knocked
когда в
or
15-й
stunned,
ключ,
and we
или
saw
какой
it
мы там
immediately
ходили
being
к
interrupted
Слизгу?
by one of the players here in
Человек
Echo,
просто
so well
умирает
done
нон-стоп
there,
на ДК.
as they're now moving on. They're up to 75% trash at this point. They still need approximately 8 to 10% before they can go down into the last boss room. So they're dealing with this trash pack here in this room as well. We have a bunch of ambushers here as well, which can be a problem, as Cyro mentioned, because of this stealth links cast that needs to be get out of before the ambush gets through, and just a bunch of other annoying abilities that these ambushers cast.
Right, for sure, but it looks like it's not going to be an issue for them. Able to melt through that trash easily enough, and they have a lot of tools to deal with those ambushes as well. You've got the Dragon Breath, you've got the Ring of Peace, you've got a whole bunch of things just able to deal with those ambushers. So they should never really get any casts off. But yeah, like you mentioned, they need about 83% trash before they finish off this third boss.
Все дороги вылез, там
Otherwise, they
еще
won't have
пак
enough trash count
справа.
to finish off the dungeon. So probably see them get to that percentage easily enough, and really the only thing left between Echo and finishing off the
Что,
dungeon
не
is
хотят еще
relatively
один пак
difficult
подвести?
tyrannical bosses.
По 2
Even on
хп
18,
Прайда.
even in the gear they're in, there's a lot of room for mistakes to be made on these bosses, and we've seen them make mistakes in this dungeons already.
Yeah, definitely a possibility that they have some issues, especially on the last boss. We know how difficult that last
Там
boss
уже
can be,
11
as there's
смертей,
just
там
so
2
much
раза
AoE damage
люди
coming in.
сдохли.
But it looks like they're struggling with the pride already. As Alia is dropping so incredibly low, just not wanting to use any of those offensive cooldowns. Alia just
Я вдыхаю,
having
я
so
не
much
знаю.
trouble making sure the whole group stays alive. But they did manage to finish it off now, and it looks like
А,
they're
и
pulling the
босса с
boss
паком,
with
под
this
БЛом,
left
под
trash pack.
этим.
So definitely a very
Не, ну вообще, кстати,
dangerous
нормально.
pull to do for them, as we don't, as we have a lot of AoE damage coming in by the boss itself. Once she starts casting those
Типа у вас
nets,
2
that we need to
бафа.
get out of those nets.
Прайд плюс
And we
БЛ.
also see the trash pack just getting melted though.
Нифига
Just
себе, как они все
immediately melted
выбили.
with that pride buff and all
Моментально.
cooldowns being popped by the Echo damage dealers. So
Пол
no
хп
problem
босса
for
срезали.
Echo, as their boss is already on 50% at this point.
Кошмар.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just easy to
Там,
get it
кстати,
through with
походу, это не
running
тираника,
mirrors,
это
easily
усиленный
AoE
мобы.
those
Что-то
down
я
with the
смотрю, как
doubles,
босс
Stormworth and Fire there, and just weapons
рассыпается, и он
order.
не дамажит почти.
Windwalker Monk just has so much damage in their 30-second
Наверное,
cooldown window.
усиленные мобы
You can see he's
все-таки.
doing more than the Mage and the DK, which are two of the most highly represented
Я
classes
просто не
in the
помню,
game
как
right
они
now. So,
эти
you know,
выглядят
perfect
аффиксы,
scenario
типа.
for them as well, and they only have to deal with one more set of Brute Assassins after dealing with that trash pretty easily.
Yeah, and we do
Нарисованные.
see a new ad wave spawning here on the boss for Echo. They get them out immediately. We see now just jumping around, making sure all of those assassins are out. And as
Прикольно.
soon as
Монах
they
прыгнул
are down,
к
there's no
хилу,
more
чтобы его не
danger for
спутало.
now. But
Потом
those ads can
назад.
actually do quite a bit of damage and quite a bit of pressure onto the tank on top of also having the boss damage. But if you have huge amounts of AoE bursts like they do, then it turns out to not be an issue for them. And
Кошмар,
we also
столько
see that
хп
ambush
просто
cast on
отрывает.
Zalia going out. Gingy is going to Zalia when he's stunned to make sure he doesn't get wept by the boss. So well done by them as they're now finishing off the boss. On the other side, Quad question mark did have some more issues, unfortunately. We saw Fam go down a little bit earlier. Now they're up to 12 deaths.
ДК
That means
Винтир,
60
кстати.
seconds
Ой, этот ДХ.
on top of their timer here, unfortunately. Just a bunch of issues for them, really, in this dungeon specifically. Might have something to do with
Что там интересно, Демон Хантера, Винтиров.
Maybe they tried
Все
to
же
play
феечками
their paladin
играют.
comp and then decided to switch later on as they saw that they just have to play that Shadow Melt comp. And maybe that's where the issues are stemming from, or maybe there's just some other stuff going on with them. Because, I mean, anything can happen. We also
Там
see
чуваки
Echo
только
making
ко
that
второму
mistake,
боссу
which is not
пришли.
usual for them. Like, they
Что-то
don't
легко
usually
для
make
их.
any of those huge mistakes.
Ты заходишь
So
такой,
definitely
пытаешься
something that can
Скризга
happen
убить
for
и уже
any of the
проебал.
teams. But,
Потому что
making
там
sure
Эхо
that
уже
they just
последнего
continue
босса
and
бит.
recover, 'cause there's still something that can go wrong for Echo.
Жестко.
There's still this last boss that can be very dangerous, especially when you have explosive, right? Because we have all of those ads spawn all over the room, which means there's explosives also possible to
Кошмар,
spawn
там
all
маг.
over the room. And the only people who can deal with ranged
Тупо развалил
explosives
слева,
is
справа,
Gingy and
пак на
Zalia,
пол
right?
хп.
So definitely can cause some issues.
But it looks like it's not going to be any issue at all for them, as Gingy is able to deal with those explosives pretty easily on his own outside the group. And he's also just soloing that one trash pack. As you can see, he has aggro on it. So not an issue for them at all. And they only have the major mini-boss left, who's kind of annoying as he ghost steps around the room occasionally. But hopefully they'll be able to get him down here before that final ghost step.
Вот чуваки лупят второго босса.
Yeah, and you
Да,
can see that
конечно.
the mini boss is also raging. I think that's also what caused them to have this wipe earlier. Just the fact that they don't have this raging removal in this group. Just no class in that group, in that setup, can remove the raging, which can cause some issues, especially if you don't have any interrupts. So they want to make sure that they
Скипнули
interrupt
Pride.
all of those raging mini bosses once they are in that range. It looked like they did it well this time around, as they're now moving on to the
Да,
boss,
опять Pride
which is the
скипнули.
last thing they have to finish off to win this dungeon and also win the series against the number 8 seed Quad question mark, which are still struggling on that third boss. So let's see how they deal with this last boss here on Echo.
And also, I want to give a little shout out to their positioning there as well. As they were finishing off the mini boss, everyone moved away as far away from the boss as they could, because you got to remember that the Prideful spawns in proximity of a random player in your group. So they needed to spawn that Prideful as far away from the boss so they could then instantly jump to the boss and Shadow Meld off aggro. And you can see they just pulled that off perfectly there. Their positioning was great. But you can see already the danger of this boss, even on 18 Tyrannical. They're getting their second Infectious Raincast already in this phase, and that's really, it's a really dangerous ability. It does a lot of damage to your group, especially when there's a 4-stack on everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And we also see them just focus the boss.
Блин,
instead
если
of
на
going
щупальцах
for this
убежать, это как
malignant
орать просто
spawn.
в голосину буду.
Just because the boss is percentage based, so the faster you push the boss lower, the earlier she will go in this intermission phase, and then you can just deal with the ad once she's down. Now, if you don't manage to push fast enough, though, then she might spawn a second ad,
Блин.
and that will cause some
Был
trouble.
мемно
because
очень,
if you have
кстати.
two
Там
ads up
БР
at the
все
same
равно
time
куча,
and
мог
no
бы
one is
кто-то на
soaking those
щупальцах и
frontals, and the
подскользнуться.
tentacles also going up on both sides, then you will have some issues. So definitely want to make sure you make the push on the boss, otherwise you will have to focus that ad. But it looks like they perfectly know when they have to focus the ad and when they can focus
ДК
the boss.
Винтир, кстати, тоже.
Right, for sure. And it looks like in this phase they
У
should
них
be
типа
able to
два
just go
винтира.
ahead and
ДХ
burn through the
и
boss here,
ДК.
not dealing with the malignant spawns, because they did have the cooldowns
Уехали.
available from both their monk and their mage there. And the boss is already pushing here into that second intermission, so it looks like it paid off perfectly for them.
Yeah, they're doing a good job as they're now in the second intermission, just dodging those tentacles back and forth. it really is a set sequence of
липко
tentacle
выпить не
spawns that
попало.
you get each time you enter this transition. You also have these plague-bound devoted spawn.
Я хочу, чтобы
To be
мистер
honest,
Чевы
they can
дошли
just
до
be seed and ignored because
дощипались, но
you
там уже не
just
по
have to finish off
шансам.
the
Они
boss.
пытаются второго
You don't
босса
have
так
to deal with
добить.
those ads if you don't want to. So theoretically, you could throw some hearts disease on them if you have any, and just ignore them. Once the boss is back up, they just finish off the boss. We see all of the cooldowns that they still have left are being popped. Specifically, that combustion by Gingy, as
Дом
they're just bursting the
плачет
boss at this point. The last
чумой.
phase is the most difficult phase in this fight, just because not only do you have to deal with the boss and the ads that spawn, you also get these tentacle sequences that you have to dodge at the same time. So can cause some issues, but no issues for Echo as they're now finishing off the boss, and they're gonna win the series 2-0. Well done, Echo.
Что-то легко пока для Эхо 2-0.
Very well done by our defending champions here.
Там
and
чуваки с Клизгом не смогли
absolutely
победить.
Phenomenal looking at what they are skipping and aren't skipping for some of these pride pulls. Like Plaguefall is such this big, wide, expansive dungeon in so many cases, and looking at how well they were able to maneuver around here, Gratis, was absolutely a sight to see.
Yeah, this is also a
Так, а что там next будет? Сейчас посмотрим. Так. Парам-парарам. А, тут не показывает, да, какие инсты будет. Ну ладно, ждем тогда пока. А, тут узера еще есть. Винора, узера. Да цех он тоже не хочет. Все просто. Тут же, типа, все играют, ну, типа, мы же не собираемся какие-то рекорды ставить, какой-то херней такой заниматься. Просто играем все по кайфу, и каждый играет на том, что ему нравится. Эквинант. Я был, кстати, винтиром изначально на ДК. И я понимаю, почему он взял его. Мифик, да. Когда кроссинг откроется. Типа, чтобы сейчас в мифик пойти всей нашей пачкой, ну, типа, этого невозможно сделать, потому что мы не с одного сервака. Как 100 гильдий убьют по миру, откроется кросс-сервер. Кому как не нам вечно везет.
Крылатый ужас, державший в страхе темные земли. Кошмар, пикирующий с небес. Ужасная нежить невообразимой мощи. Ксанту чумная.
О, кто-то бьет, нормально. Сейчас ждем тогда второе быстро в тришку. Мне интересно, на самом деле, просто все инсты, наверное, посмотреть больше. Я так понимаю, что персонажи вообще, походу, меняться даже и не будут почти. Там Golden Guards против Гаргуль стрим какой-то. Будут играть. Не знаю, что за чего.
Земля и магма, восстань! магией. Готовый сражаться за свою свободу, несокрушимый Урц.
Не, манки очень крутые. И что танки, что ДД очень крутые сейчас. Там у них какой-то ненормальный дэмэдж пачку. Типа... Он сам по себе очень сильно херачит, так у него еще и баф на всю команду 5% дэмэджа. Это очень много, по сути. Ну, для таких вот, типа, максимизации дэмэджа, для турниров и всего остального это много. 5% физ урона. Да успокойся. Урц.
Теперь весь Малдракс узнает, что с тобой лучше не шутить.
Бесконечно. О, там опять квест на артиллерию появился. Мне интересно, насколько долго перерывы будут. Потому что это типа самое важное. И по сути самое скучное. Когда вот такие что-то подобное смотришь. ТЦ, холипау. Шаманы должны быть. Шаманов хвалят. Что можно еще пока поделать? Ну, все квестики возьмем. Не, Монк хил точно не будет. Это самый дерьмовый хил, который есть сейчас. Для ключей. Ему там очень тяжело. Типа для ключей очень прикольные сейчас это шаман. ДЦшка. Холи Пау не знаю, кстати, почему не взяли. Типа Холи Пау, если там прям лютый задар, насколько я понимаю, то Холи Пау, он типа дамажит очень много. То есть у него будет там что-то в районе 4000 хпс и 5000 дэмэджа еще сверху. Ну а для, опять же, вот для таких фишек, где тебе нужно на время пройти быстрее и так далее, это решает очень сильно. Когда у тебя хил дамажит как ДД. Это же круто. Ну и походу за счет этого и попробовали выехать, не получилось, взяли ДЦ дефолт, но... Ну, там Тихскризгл не простил. С некрополем, это что такое? Новые локалки. О, давай-ка пуджей новую сделаем.
Бери оружие и становись в очередь. Ищешь с кем подраться.
Мандракс, победитель врагов в Данвальде. На это в инсту можно сходить. Тревога в Кирвиндред. Я не помню, какой там на 29-й, по-моему, чтобы паджик открылся. От талантов 28. 3 надо пункта известности мне где-то найти. Так, там... Блин, они как-то время тянут. Они смотрят, как там люди с обсклизгва умирали сейчас. Это, конечно, это мемно, да. Любой может, кроме Монка, ты про что?
Говори громче, солдат.
Какие-то квесты, что ли? Погнали сюда. Что там? Я могу как-то сделать? Сейчас подумаю. Я могу типа не фул убирать окно, например. Делать вот так вот. Словно. Пока просто летаю в перерыве, а потом назад вам разворачивать, чтобы вам не скучно было. Могу даже звук оставлять. Только там черный экран, да, остается? Из-за того, что я в WoW разворачиваюсь. Кайф. А нельзя как-то сделать, чтобы он даже в альтабе воспроизводился? Ладно. Походу не по шансу. Слишком жесткие технологии пока. Чтобы типа в альтабе показывалось еще что-то. Так Вов и так в режиме, в оконном режиме. Весь экран оконный режим. Это из-за того, что YouTube сосал. Так происходит. О, Некротик Вейк первая. Так, это... Я не знаю, что это за аффикс. Я пойду сейчас посмотрю на сайте. Сейчас, сек. Как посмотреть-то? А можно же, да, зайти на... Вот. Фу, ну... это нон-боссы, все понял. То есть, короче, первые два будет усиленные мобы. А если будет третья карта, то там усиленные боссы. И везде так, походу, сделали. То есть, вот эти, типа, два мелких аффикса меняются. На первые 2 карты усиленные мобы, на третью босс. Ну и типа вот этот... типа прайд сезонный везде. Что там, что-то интересное будет? Ну да, они поехали, кстати.
You can see Golden Guardians, like they have world markers down indicating where stuff is going to happen. And you see, yeah, right now we've got a big pull coming out with boss for Golden Guard. Oh no, yeah, with boss. Everything coming together as the two teams both deciding to play that rogue as well for a little bit of extra control in this, as I said.
Я что-то начинаю хейтить эту фигню.
Very interesting to see the rogue coming out
Что
here. By deep dropping
нельзя
incredibly
альтапнуться.
low, did proc his,
Я человек альтап, у меня нет
defensive
второго
unit to be
монитора.
able to get back up. So very close for them, but they did finish off all of the trash now. But yeah, interesting to see that rogue on both sides. Definitely would have not been a surprise at all if this was BFA to see any sort of rogues. But in this, in Shadowlands, we don't see rogues that often in dungeons. So interesting to see them coming out for the team as they actually go out of the dungeon.
Ой, это
Which,
наши
very
челы.
interesting.
Поехали.
Well, does Gargoyle Stream decides to just pull their fight mob around the corner as they got up to their
Там
first 20% off.
у чуваков сдох хил, они
So
просто
my
из
wager
инсты
gets
выскочили.
we'll probably, this one's probably gonna
Блин,
be
охуенно, поехали.
Yeah, that's something has gone slightly awry here. We'll be giving this one another take.
First, I was thinking,
Sometimes
are they
you
even
just-
allowed to go out of the
Yeah,
dungeon?
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
is this allowed?
Is this legal?
I was
Unfortunately-
sitting there in the replay channel. I was thinking, it was like,
Что происходит-то?
resetting the dungeon. I was like, what are they doing? And then it didn't occur to me that they're having to remake. I was like, what is happening?
Looks like, yeah, we may have had a slight affix-related issue there. Sometimes, of course, that happens. So we'll be getting a reset going, and both teams starting from scratch with the correct affixes. Which,
А,
of course,
там аффиксы
includes
другие.
storming, as we mentioned. That one
Типа аффиксы
very,
неправильные,
very
поэтому
toxic
они
for
вышли.
the
Я
melee
понял.
players, which both teams have
Сейчас
the
там пока
rogue
ресетят,
and the
все, я пойду
windwalkers.
чайку
We're
налью.
going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and this is also the first time we've been seeing some rogues start coming into MDI, and rogues really hasn't been shining too heavily in dungeons on live servers right now, Dratnos, as well. What do you think?
It's one of the top 4 DPS specs most represented in the high keys still. The world first plus 23 was timed on the live servers recently
true.
with the rogue included as well. So I think that it's a spec that is flying a little bit under the radar because, like at the end of BFA, you're often going to see it fighting for that 3rd or 4th place spot with the tank on the damage meters, but it's providing still a tremendous amount of utility. You know, not the shroud is a little bit less important than it used to be because invis pots have gotten relatively less costly, right? Instead of costing you 5 pre-pots, they're now costing you 1.
And
but
Mind Soothe.
yeah, Mind Soothe existing as well as actually there's a lot of skips that does make possible. But rogues still bring a lot of control. You know, sap, a powerful out of combat CC, gouges, stuns, all of those effects really work well when you have other specs that are going to be able to carry the damage with their burst cooldowns. And there is no better example of specs that can carry the entire team's damage than a Fire Mage and a Windwalker with Combustion and Weapons of Order going. You don't need a 3rd DPS for that. You need somebody who can stop the casts, and that is exactly what
Yeah.
our rogue does.
We also have Raging, right? So that a rogue can
Yeah.
also remove Raging now with that poison as well.
should.
So that might also be very interesting for them because they needed more utility, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you
What do
might,
you guys think
if
about
it's already
the-
expected to bring that, they might as well just lump everything into one spec and say, okay, here you go.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
not?
What do you guys think about the weapon usage and how it's going to be affecting this dungeon? Do you think that they're just going to... Because my projection is, I suspect that they do an absolutely enormous pull in the Necropolis and an absolutely enormous pull in that wing before the second boss and use their javelins there. Whereas on live keys, it's more of like, we're trying to javelin and orb a bunch of bosses here, where I think that they're going to use the weapons to facilitate larger pulls for an MDI scenario.
They might just also use the orbs for some of those huge pulls anyway, right? Because they also have the Kyrian orbs that they can use for huge pulls. They have the just dungeon orbs they can use. So I think we're just gonna see big pull into big pull into big pull into skipping pride, probably.
Yeah, pretty much. And at that point, I mean, we were already kind of seeing that at the very beginning of the instance where, you know, Golden Guardians was pulling everything on top of the boss. And again, we kind of had that Covenant swap again coming in for the Priests, going back to the Kyrian to take advantage of that uncapped AoE from Boon of the Ascended. So I think in the case of Golden Guardians, once we start getting all the technical issues fixed up for them, we'll probably just see a very similar pull coming up to them. But like you were mentioning, Necrotic Wake is this dungeon that's tons and tons of different weapons and power buffs that you're able to pick up throughout it. And probably going to be expecting some more uses. I'm not sure how many of those Goliath Drenos that they're actually going to take advantage of and wait for the Steward to be able to repair it and be able to spawn all those orbs.
Yeah, that's the Covenant-specific buff in Necrotic Wake is those malfunctioning Goliaths that if you have a Kyrian player, they can summon their Steward and tell their Steward to repair it. There are a couple of them scattered throughout the dungeon. It ejects anima exhaust
Mechanics,
that
noise.
can grab to get a nice
Понятно.
buff. Does quite a bit of damage, but it takes some time for the Steward to repair it. It's a little bit finicky, and they're not necessarily needed.
О,
But you
поехали.
do have those weapons
Как я
available,
по
which
таймингу?
any player of any Covenant can use. There are these spears, these hammers, and these other anima orbs that are located all around the dungeon that are extremely, extremely powerful and just do absurd amounts of damage in addition to potentially stuns or silence effects, depending on which weapon you're using. Here we go, though, back into game once again with the right affixes, which, as you can see, are fortified, raging, and storming. And there is Golden Guardians with that
Нифига себе, там
massive
куча
pull
мобов
onto the
просто.
boss.
So we see the Pride mob just spawning while this whole pool is happening right there. 4 Golden Guardians. They have the Pride mob plus the boss at this point. And while this whole pool was happening, Yoda actually jumped over to that Goliath, making sure he activates
Жесть
it.
какая.
And
Там
now
с
they're picking up the
Чумакостом
orbs
они
so
это
they
все
can
сделали.
finish off the boss. But to keep her down, unfortunately,
Чумакост.
it is the battle rest for them as well, so this might be an issue as they have to somehow get him back up. There we go. Oh, never mind, he is playing Windwalker, not DK, my bad. So they had to use the engineering rest anyway. Did manage to get him back up, and still, this is very difficult for them as they still have to finish up that Pride as well, missing that damage from the Windwalker.
Yeah, Lady
Чумакост.
has been able to
Порвет
save
вас.
his Last Resort cheat death proc, but Yoda was unable to do that. When he cast that engineering res soon thereafter, it cost him his cheat, so they've used quite a few resources here on that little mishap, but it is still working out nicely for them in terms of just how much they've been able to accomplish here with their very first pull of the dungeon. You know, getting this boss with all the trash and then the Pride at the same time, they are making a lot of stuff happen in a very short amount of time here.
Сколько там?
Yeah, you
40к
can
у
see
мага
just how much of
дэмэджа.
disruption that storming is causing for this team that all wants to be
39
standing
рога,
in melee,
40к
right?
маг,
Even their ranged players, even their fire
17
mage and their
тысяч
priest, you know, the
Monk.
Ascended, you got to be in melee to make full use of that. Fire mages, if you want to get full shifting power damage, which isn't too much damage, not a big deal if you miss it, but a little bit extra damage. All of that you're going to need to get into range for those storming tornadoes to cause you a problem. As you can see here, Golden Guardians take care of the first boss, Mind Soothe the Necromancer there, and they're able to walk through here. We're going to have Lighty activating.
Почему
this,
челиков
Goliath.
одинаковые эти?
This is a almost full Kyrian team here, so they have a lot of different stewards that they can use here. And
Одинаковый сетап опять.
which ones they actually decide to pop to activate each of these
Или им
Goliaths.
типа дают сетап на карту?
So actually pretty big pull that they're doing here. They're pulling 3 packs together. We do have this Necromancer that they have to deal with. Once the Necromancer dies, he's just going to kill all of the ads that are related to that trash pack. So just a bunch of single target damage that he can do. But because they've also pulled the other trash on top, they're just AoEing everything down. As the pack
Просто
guys
я
are
не
all
верю,
just
что люди
Sorcerer
схватили
and the
Рогу,
Bone Mender left.
когда есть
So
ДК,
huge amount of
например,
damage coming in by
который
the Golden
хуярил
Guardians.
как
They also have
сумасшедший у Эхо
that
сейчас.
orb buff as well from the Goliath, which just helped them out. That's why they're all standing in melee, because that aura, the buff that you get from the Goliath.
Больше похоже, что им дают сетап под карту и говорят, что типа вы можете свапнуть одного персонажа, например.
Yeah, you can see their management of this prideful, those boasts, the 4-direction one. They're kind of setting up stacking of the players that don't have it on top of each other, so that they can avoid that stun, which is nasty. It actually went off during that first boss fight as well, which is part of what.
Либо люди день и ночь задрачивают эти ключи, и у них уже
They're
есть...
able to make good work of that pride though, and this is the second pride of the dungeon, and it's the second one that they've decided not to skip.
И у них типа есть уже на каждый данж определенный сетап персонажей, максимизирующий там типа урон. Не знаю.
They're gonna actually be doing a pull here rather than any sort of skip. So they're looking to get a lot of count done. They have a nice big juicy health target there. in that
Wow.
Marrogar model guy. I forget his name. That has it's something that they can primary target off of now. They need to make sure that they're able to group everything up here. And
That's
they're wow,
Big pull.
that's a lot of
everything.
bombs. What is Yoda doing? Okay, Yoda's used a weapon. Yoda.
160 тысяч у Роги только что ДПС было.
That is.
I think Yoda has the orb picked up because I didn't see it on Lightsy, so I was figuring maybe they have used the orb
Чего,
on the previous
блядь?
pull, but it didn't look like it, so it was surely Yoda that picked up that orb and was doing this huge amount of AoE damage here to that pack. That's what allowed them to do this insane pull, as they're also proccing the third Pride mob as they are on 67% trash percentage, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna see the same thing, or a similar pull at least, happening for Das Gargoyle stream as well. So they are a little bit behind on their side as they're just now popping that second Pride boss, and we'll see if they deal with it as well on their side. Yes,
Почему
they
они
are.
берут Рогу, когда
And,
есть ДК
yeah,
через
just
10 минут?
doing the same thing, just
Почему у
everything a
Роги
little bit
160к
slower
дэмэджа?
for Das Gargoyle stream.
Yeah, about 20% trash and a pride's worth of health now separating these two teams. As you can see, actually, for Gargoyle, they are sending out their rogue on a stealth mission here of some kind, maybe triggering the RP up ahead while the rest of the
I
team
think
finishes
they
off
might
the
be pulling the
pride.
boss out.
Interesting.
I've actually heard of a thing where you can tricks the
Мне кажется, он
tank
возьмет
and
шарик
pull the
сейчас.
boss out, and he will actually,
Он берет шарик и
actually go
идет
outside
паки
the
2
arena.
убивать сзади.
or
Вместе с
not
боссом.
sure, he can pick up the orb. We'll see if he does that, because it is a possibility to pull out the boss, but because then the ads actually don't do anything anymore. They
Да,
grip
то есть
them
это они
back
шарик
down,
просто
so
взяли,
it
чтобы
looks
2
like
пака
they
сейчас
really
убить
just did this
быстро.
for the orb, yeah.
Meanwhile, Golden Guardians have pulled this boss after clearing that massive trash pull we saw from them. Still have a little bit of that pride buff left as well, as they're going to be dealing with this first wave of ads. These ads need to be taken care of by either being killed or by being crowd controlled by the time the boss casts his final harvest. Otherwise, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. The ones that are crowd controlled, they're not going to cause too much problems.
Рога
But if
топ
there's any
ДПС
that are
не
out that are
согласен.
not crowd controlled, they're going to explode for a lot of damage on this plus 18 key
Просто
level.
здесь
There's
что-то
not a lot of wiggle
очень
room for that
жесткое
happening.
произошло.
You can see the two mages out there,
А,
and one
я понял, что
shackle.
там произошло.
They will be, yeah, just not
Тут же
exploding
карта
because
такая,
of
что
the
здесь
crowd control.
шарики,
So very
копья,
well managed
разбросы,
by
там
Golden
вот это
Guardians.
все. Там Рога с шариком пришел.
Yeah, so just
Поэтому
quickly
у него
talking about those
160 тысяч
weapons,
было.
because we see the
Точно,
huge
блин.
amounts of damage coming out from
Это
both
же
those teams, from the players who are picking up that orb. So we also see that huge pull happening
фишка
for
инсты с
Das
чумакостом.
Gargoyle stream, or at least they're
Да
done with
какой
the
это
pull
Рога?
now,
Всем
so they
Рога
also have
сосал,
huge numbers,
если что,
and
без
what
обид.
basically is happening is there's just a bunch of
Тут
weapons around this
226 шмот у
area that
всех.
they can pick up, which help you out. And the specific item that they used was this orb that just does a huge amount of pulsing AoE damage around you, and that's the amount of damage that we saw from Yoda for Golden Guardians. That's what made this huge pull possible for them. So that's definitely something you need to keep an eye out, and that's something you also should be using on live servers if you haven't yet.
Ну,
Make sure
молодо
you do
копье,
use
да,
those
но я
orbs,
типа
and
забыл
also
про
the
сверки
spears as
вообще.
well,
Там
which,
же типа
help
первая
you out
сверка
for
лежит,
bosses,
здесь
but also
вторая.
for trash, as we see those both of the
И все
teams,
сверки собрал
making
Рога,
sure they're
поэтому он
using
топ
it for trash,
ДПС.
because it is fortified, so it saves them a lot more time making sure they do those insanely big pulls.
Yeah, you can see Shakib actually carrying that spear on his back right now. It looks like they are not going to be just immediately going up to the. Yeah, just Yoda is going
Да,
to be going
понятно,
up to the
что
Acropolis.
все
Maybe they're
лучше
going to be
фурика, если что.
snapping mobs down in some manner. It's possible that Yoda like tricks.
Amazing.
Yeah, so Tricks the Trade is going to proc here
Oh, yeah.
as he runs around. And he's got to make sure he gets threat on everything here. He is going to go down, but they should have threat on the rest of the group here. And here it comes, yeah, so
Yep.
everything is going to get snapped onto Lighty here. It's going to be evading for a couple
And the
seconds. Mobs
orb.
evade now, but now
Да и
Yoda's
что?
gonna grab that
Много
orb.
персонажей,
Yeah,
которые
he'll come
кливают.
back
Ты
in.
видел, что
They've got
ДК
a lot of
делает?
sigils here. Big
ДХ
severe damage
делает.
coming out from Lip.
Amazing.
Монах делает.
Shakib also has a spear that's going to be used here,
Маг,
and
у
Yoda
которого
is
нет
gonna use the
ограничения
orb.
на цели.
Using all of these weapons, plus the ability
ММ
of
Хант,
snapping the
у
mobs
которого
down
нет
out of the
ограничений на цели.
Acropolis. They are just going to be able to deal with the whole trash area very, very quickly. And they have the pride now on top of it that they can cleave down with this last stitch work. Incredible, incredible technique there from Golden Guardians.
That's actually an amazing pull, and he also like.
Не, у
the
него
death
типа
was
в аллее
also on
нет
purpose, right?
ограничений
Because
на
he needs to
цели.
get down somehow, and the only way to
Типа
get
спал
down
вот
is
этот
to
на
die
50-м.
and release. So this was all intentional.
Я про
They
это имею
used
в виду.
that tricks of the trade to make sure once Yoda is dead,
Обычно же
the
у
mobs
некоторых,
just,
ну
snap
типа,
down
если
to
не брать
Lighty.
милишников,
Just an incredible pull.
у некоторых,
They're up to
у
90%
всех
trash
ранжей
now,
есть
and they
ограничения
proc
на
this Pride
цели.
mob. And even the Pride mob, as you said,
Кроме
was
там
efficient
каких-то
for them to kill
специфичных
because they still
обилок.
had the stitch Stitchwork
Типа у
left, which
мага
just has more HP than the rest of the
и
trash
у
group.
этого, у
So they
Имамханта.
really efficiently deal with the Pride and that Stitchwork as well, as they're now moving on, dealing with the rest of the trash that still is up there, and there's not that much left after that insane pull. Wow.
Yeah, that was a really good way to group up a bunch of mobs that don't normally group up.
Но
It did
тут
cost
типа
them some
смотри, в
time,
чем
of course, you know,
фишка.
having death
В этой
where somebody
инсте
goes out by themselves, and then you still
есть
need to go off
специфичные
later, but,
шмотки, разбросанные на
it's
карте,
working
которые
out well for
подбираешь,
them.
они
As it looks like one
очень сильно
combination
бустят
of
урон.
Fleshcrafter and Loyal Creation didn't
То
get
есть
pulled
любой
there.
персонаж,
If I
который
had to
забежал бы
guess, I
сейчас
would
в
say
пачку
this was
мобов
probably a mistake.
и нажал
The
сверху,
Alliance
был бы
was supposed to
100
come with
тысяч
that pull.
ДПС, когда
But
они
it shouldn't be
зачищали.
too costly because I believe
Это
they've
мог быть и
opened
не
up
Рога,
such a
это мог
commanding
быть
lead,
монах.
against here, as we
Так
can
что
see,
это
it does the
такое.
Gargoyle stream, who are inside the Necropolis now and killing it the old-fashioned way rather than snapping anything down.
Yeah, it is possible. Do you think it might? Nah, I guess not. Sometimes they do want to keep this collector because he just
Роги
has a
неплохие,
frontal
но
cleaver that actually also does friendly
они не
damage
входят в
to
топ-4
other
по
mobs.
ДПС.
So sometimes we see people just keeping up the collector to help you with the pride mobs, to help you with the boss, to help you with whatever. But it looks
Ну, я,
like
конечно,
that's
инфу
not
даю
what
больше
they're
по
planning
рейдам,
on
типа
doing on
я
Golden
по
Guardian
ключам
side,
не особо
so
шарю.
it definitely wasn't intended,
Мне поэтому
as you
интересно было
mentioned.
посмотреть,
Now
что
they
тут
have to
люди
deal with
вообще
the two
делают,
collectors,
придумывают.
which is really just something that you can't speed up. Because once this
То есть,
whole
типа, в
boss room
ключах
is
фишка
cleared,
это
you
быстро
get
чистить
two
паки, грубо
collectors that
говоря.
spawn afterwards, and then you still have
А в
two
рейде тебе
extra
нужен
trash
соло
tracks
таргет
right
ДПС
after that.
хороший.
That is all
То есть с
time
полной
gated, and you have to finish
противоположность.
off that trash to move on. So definitely nothing they can do to speed this up
Если
other
брать
than
рейды,
killing the
там
mobs
Рога
faster.
сосал.
But yeah, this was just a huge play by Golden Guardians with this snap. Just huge amounts of time saved. They do have those two deaths.
Да, это мог быть даже Ферал, кстати, реально.
But those 10 seconds, they
Да,
well
бот не
made up
разрешает
with
ссылки
this
кидать,
insane
только если ты подписчик
Lighty
на
taking a
канале или
raging
модер.
cleaver there instead of it hitting any of the squishy members of the
Так
Still
раньше,
almost
потому что ты
killed him, though.
подписанный был.
That does a lot of damage. And yeah,
Подписка
it's tough 'cause
пропала, как бы,
you
получай бан
can't
въебало.
leave mobs alive and bring them into the boss right from this room because you need to kill them to spawn the
Что ты хотел
next
скинуть?
gauntlet
Скинь в
part.
личку, если
So,
что-то такое
in the
прям
past, some
крутое.
teams have made use of like grabbing one of the collectors from the very start of the dungeon and snapping it into this this area. That was back
Про
before
мага я ничего
they-
не говорил.
You could briefly do
Маг
that with
хорош.
bolstering. And you could bolster one up to be like 30 stories tall, and then snap
Вон,
it in here
смотри,
and have it
сколько
kill all the
дамажит.
stuff. But now that doesn't work, it's
Монаха
no
сколько
longer
дамажит
worth
Рога в пачку.
doing all of that work to get a collector that can actually persist through this area because you do have to kill them
Как же
to,
Рога
yeah,
разваливает. Ух,
to actually spawn these waves of the
топ
gauntlet.
ДПС.
Yeah, you can see
Улетает в
they're making
стратосферу.
relatively quick work of this, but they're also making sure to save their cooldown.
Это опять же рофл,
Because
конечно,
they
там, потому
can't
что
pull
что-то
multiple
нажал,
attacks
монах тоже.
together, at a time like
Какую-то
this, there's
фишку.
no way, to accomplish that feasibly for them. They're instead
Ну,
just gonna have to
типа,
go through these one at a time, but they can use their cooldown
либо
before
шарик,
and
либо
after
что-то еще.
on the big trash
Потому что он
before and
слишком
then on the
как-то в
boss
стратосферу улетел.
Yeah. It is too bad that they fixed the issue with the collectors just one-shotting.
Хотя
bosses
хз,
with
может он
axes, because I
просто
would
так и
love
развалил.
to see some of those big
В 4 таргета.
cleavers
Ну там больше
being thrown
4
at
таргета.
bosses. So unfortunate that that is not possible anymore. But we do see Golden Guardians now attacking that last trash pack. While we see Gargoyle, they are on their left trash pack, I believe, from the gauntlet. So not too far behind if you also look at the percentage. But yeah, still a decent
Роги
difference in
топ-1 в
favor of Golden
ПВП.
Guardians. It is a possibility that they can catch up on boss.
Для
but
ПВЕ они
it's
супер
very
специфичны.
unlikely because I do assume that both of these
Это
teams
просто
are going to
факт.
be one facing the boss, so they're going to be killing it once the boss is hooked down before he jumps back up. And even if the boss jumps back up, they can just get him back down immediately with that third hook that the Stitchwork is casting on a boss. We do see the Pride as well spawning on Golden Guardian's side. They have 100% trash now, so they have to deal with this Pride. I do assume you could shadow melt this one. Do you think they don't want to shadow melt this to ensure that they can one face the boss?
С топомещиком. Ну я смотрю, сижу. Я же не буду сейчас это открывать, у меня второго монитора нет. Как мне это сделать? Я же с тобой сижу, смотрю.
Which is an adjustment you can make in the middle of a dungeon. I don't think Golden Guardians traditionally do those sorts of decisions, though. I think rather than adjusting their route, they usually will just keep.
Но Эхо только что выиграли в говно 2-0, и у них не было Роги. Для меня это пока более крутая статистика, чем среднестатистическая вот эта фигня с статой.
Then maybe they decide okay, we just need to kill the boss before it does its first escape. And if that's the case, then yeah, having that pride is definitely helpful as a bit of a disaster strikes on the smaller part.
Блин, мне интересно было бы посмотреть на апнутых боссов. У них типа пачки мобов апнутые в инсте. И следующие тоже будут апнутые мобы. Было бы мемно посмотреть на апнутых боссов. Какой-нибудь склизгу опять кого-нибудь отхуярил.
Which really is a pack where no one ever uses their cooldowns and everyone always thinks it's the easiest pack. But then you have one person get fixated by 2 of those cleavers and all of a sudden no one soaks it and the person dies. This is really a pack where I've seen so many deaths and so many people always think it's like the easiest pack ever, but then you still just end up having a mistake here or there, or you're in the wrong position for the fixate, wrong position for the cleaver, and then you have a death. And that's exactly what happened here for Gargoyle, unfortunately. But we do see Golden
Демон
Guardians,
Хантер вообще хп не дергается.
very well
Кошмар
one-facing this
какой-то.
boss. They already have it down on the second hook, right?
I was actually
Or did
completely
they have the
mistaken about
second
that.
phase?
Yeah, it escaped and they pulled it back down. So
Oh, okay. So they did
entirely,
need 2 phases. Wow.
yeah.
Huh.
Which it's actually, if that's the pacing that boss has on these plus 18 keys with these comps, maybe that means that on Tyrannical, if we come back here in a future Cup weekend with Tyrannical potentially being active in here, I wonder just how difficult that boss might become because they did feel like they needed the pride for it, maybe just to survive even on Fortified here.
А что за ковенант для ДЦ берут обычно? Кирию, да? Да, Кирию.
Well, we do have the Fire Mage, right, with the combustion, but the other 2 classes maybe not the best to have this huge amount of single target burst, so maybe they could theoretically change up the setup to enable that.
Ну, так, ой, этот Демон Хантер, да, он слишком какой-то жесткий.
Right. The thing you could do to make this group do more single target would be switching the rogue into like an unholy death knight or potentially.
Ну, там чуваки даже еще после этого предыдущего босса не били.
We saw a lot of great use of vanishing, skipping ahead, grabbing.
И там еще Прайд убивают.
Integral to the strategy here. So maybe you could have a hunter do that. Hunter would also do more burst single target, but I think the rogue has really shown that it's doing great.
Легко для этих челов получается.
As I said earlier, it's competing for that 3rd place slot on the meters as Lighty actually overtakes Yoda here right now for 3rd place on the damage meters.
Странно, где 2 смерти произошло у тех чуваков.
Between Golden Guardians and a 1-0 lead in the series.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that replacing the rogue would be a wise play for this dungeon specifically, just because of the huge amount of utility that it provides.
Ну да, типа надо смотреть, наверное, когда уже сильные команды встретятся.
Yeah, definitely looks like the rogue belongs into this dungeon if you want to play the strategy that we saw Golden Guardians pull out here. And the last boss,
ну хотя, фиг знает, там типа непонятно было. То есть теха прям вообще разваливали, а там челики были, которые на склизгли отъехали. Здесь, хотя типа первую карту они шли вровень, они 10% босса не добили, разница была. То есть в теории, если бы они чуть-чуть получше где-то что-то сделали, был бы 1-1 и 3-я карта.
Than you would otherwise, but there we go. Boss goes down, and Golden Guardians winning this first series 1-0. First game, sorry.
Бурдичева никогда не спекнется. Ну, по кайфу в другом спеке играть, в этом и смысл. Вы не понимаете, походу. Так. Что можно поделать пока минут 5-10? Есть предложение, чат? Пока там заканчивается Коттева. Ну, точнее, новая, пока не стартанет. Да, там, кстати, скрытые шипы есть, если что. Это будет пожестче ДЦ. Блин, мифик я хочу. Было бы прикольно. как и нам бесконечно везет. 200. Чё пожестче? Так в смысле, я визгу не убивал же уже.
Не достаю.
У нас там Древендред, еще что-то. О, Драксус. Вообще было бы прикольно. Можно пойти пока, кстати, позалипать, как, например, в Мифике эти убивали всех боссов. Комплексити. Типа посмотреть, что там меняется вообще. Топ ДПС класса Shadowlands. Ну и чё? Вот я открыл. Топ ДПС в одну цель. Shadow Priest, Feral Druid, Balance Druid, Arms, Hunt, Unholic, End, Helem и Рога на 9. Ты мне говоришь топ. Вауешки. Рога головорез. Жестко. Интересно, откуда эта статистика? Потому что если я, например, Raider Hill сейчас открою. Там же должна быть стата, нет, по идее? Или где у нас обычно стата? Run lead. А где ДПС-то посмотреть? Ладно. Больше не согласен. Пачка, в смысле? Зачем пачка? Смотри, показываю один раз. 213 там левел. Открываем. Четырнадцатый ключ. 15-й. 14-й ключ. 15-й. Что-то никуда не берут. Ну хорошо, ладно. Может, я типа зажрался. 14-15 ключи. Давай, давай, пониже. Что у нас пониже есть? Тринадцатый, например. 13-й. Не берут никуда. Ну ладно. Давай 12-й. Блин, не берут. Рио, понял. 1000 Рио это мало. Понял. Для 12-го ключа это слишком. Согласен. Самое смешное, что мне нет смысла идти никуда ниже 15-го ключа. По шмоткам. Что там происходит? Ничего не происходит. Бесконечно везет. Как не надо. Да, сейчас пойду десятки закрывать, чтобы Рио набить. Поиграю 2 недельки, чтобы у меня Рио подскочил. Глядишь, хоть в 1.15 возьмут. Плюс каждый день сидит этот Нео, который ноет в конфе тем, что его никуда не берут. У человека 1500 Рио, все 15 ключи в тайм закрыты. Он играет на Демон Хантере ментовом танке. Танке. Его не берут ни в один 15 ключ. Ты мне будешь дальше про Рио рассказывать. Хорошо, уши развесили. Уши развесил. Что там? Все равно ничего нету, да? Перерывы это самое такое. Сюда. Да мне не интересно, что у тебя закрыто. Я тебе говорю про то, что как это работает. Суть в том, что попасть в какую-то рандомную пачку супер тяжело. Сюда. Что делать людям, которые типа вообще в солянку играют в эту игру? Типа, я-то, ну, хотя бы есть какая-то компания, с которой я играю периодически в WoW. Что делать людям, которые вообще в соло, например, зашли попробовать поиграть в WoW? О, второй этот кровавые катакомбы. Что там еще не стартануло?
Golden Guardians and does Gargoyle stream. Of course, last game of the day for either of these teams. They will have 2 more matches after this one. So if this game is decisive, the Gargoyles will be heading down to the lower bracket, but that is still an option to win the tournament as well, because this is double elimination. No lower bracket matches today, but we will have some tomorrow and on Sunday. So not out of it yet, even if they lose here, but they really, really rather stay in that upper bracket if they can. That would require them winning not just here, but in Game 3, which is Mr. Tyrna Scythe, which is also a tricky place. Mr. Tyrna Scythe is the kind of dungeon that it's a very popular one on the
Тут
live
опять
server.
будет сейчас
It's
сильные
not one
мобы.
I'd be excited about going up against Golden Guardians in. I think you'd have better chances here in Sanguine Depths, where
Они
there's a lot
как-то
more that could feasibly
хитро
go wrong.
забалансили. Они, короче, все инсты, где
As well, and, you know,
жесткие
if
боссы,
whichever of these teams does move on into the
сделали
bracket, they also have to face off against Echo tomorrow, so it's really
Типа,
quite a
сделали
challenging
сильный
side of the
трэш.
bracket that we're seeing very early on for these teams, but I think in a lot of cases, Nagura, this is pretty much par for the course in many respects for Golden Guardians. So used to fighting, you know, almost their nemesis, really, their top rivals, Echo, so early in the upper bracket, so quickly.
Yeah, it really seems to, at least in the past, it just seemed to be this same story every time where they meet up in the upper bracket, they lose against them, fall down into the lower bracket, and then fight them again in the finals. And the lower bracket, it's just
Не
always
собирать по 6 сфер на монахах.
so much favorable to be in the upper bracket because you have less games that you need to play. You can practice more for the final games, which
Мы
has
когда первые
more
разы
instances of
ходили,
best of five. So just
ну или
so
даже
much
не
more,
первые же, там тоже да,
favorable to
было
be in the
мемные
upper
моменты
bracket and so much better for practice time.
с этим.
But Golden Guardians, of course, have to win against Gargoyles first to be able to meet
Кому-то
Echo in the
сферок
upper
не
bracket
доставалось.
tomorrow. So
Начался
you do have to
срач
win this
конфе.
Sanguine Depths key. And Sanguine Depths, as Dratno said, is really just a dungeon that is just incredibly difficult. I know on live servers, a lot of teams struggle with this dungeon specifically, even though the timer of this dungeon is not that hard. As long as you don't wipe, the timer is pretty easy, right? But just so many problems in this dungeon with the boss's difficulty, the trash difficulty. It's just so easy to make a mistake here.
Oh, those grand overseers, the gauntlet at the
Yeah.
Ну
end.
да, здесь очень
There's,
много,
you know,
типа,
the tight corridors,
рассказывают, что
fighting
очень
those
много
chamber sentinels, there's a lot of
уникальных
spaces
мобов
where
с
things
забилками.
open up
Можно
almost
легко
immediately,
вайпнуться.
so
Если не
problems abound
вайпаешься,
for a lot
проходит
of these
изи, но
teams, and
куча
that's probably
мобов.
one of the more interesting things, looking at how some of these routes are going to a bit better develop as well, Dratnos, over time, is to see what are they going to be able to actually get around for some of these worst positions.
Ну тут да, тут же есть
Yeah, I think
эти
things like, you know, whether
горгули,
what order you're gonna do
которые
dungeon, it can
на
be pretty
уешке там
easy
под
within a
тобой
team to pretty
спаунят.
quickly identify what you think is gonna be best. You know,
Танцоры
you'll try a lot of different things in your
с
first few
цепями,
practice runs,
мужички.
but maybe there's a pull that just doesn't
Трэш
feel like
здесь
it's
сильный,
going to work out.
плюс-минус.
And then the first cup comes
И
around,
трэш
and the
усиленный.
other team has got it
Но мне
working,
кажется,
and
все
they're
равно
like,
тут
hang on,
типа вот эти
maybe
боссы
we need to
прям
go back
есть
to the drawing
жесткие.
board here and shave a minute, shave 30 seconds off of our Sanguine
Последний
Depths by
босс плюс
adapting this
второй, вот
strategy.
этот как
So,
раз мужик,
that's one of the
который
exciting
круги
parts about
катается,
MDI
вот
is
он
that
прям жесткий.
there's sort of a
Если бы
collaborative
боссы
element
усилены
here
были.
where by the end, even though these teams are competing against each other, it's also sort of that competition forges the best possible route by the end of the season, and that is a fun process to see as these teams, you know, learn from each other and keep pushing each other to do even faster runs of these dungeons.
Yeah, it's sort of a crowdsourced competition for the best possible routes. And, you know, every season we're always kind of surprised by greater growth on the routes. Every new seasonal affix starts changing some of these different encounters around just a little bit. But we're ready to go. Let's see what both these teams have in store as Golden Guardians and Does Gargoyle Stream face off in the Sanguine Depths.
Looks like it's going to be the Venthyr Vengeance Demon Hunter from Does Gargoyle Stream. Door of Shadows in with that Soulbind trait that makes Door of Shadows disorient,
открыли
followed by the
бутылку.
Misery Sigil. And they're going
Бонус
to group up a
пошел.
bunch of mobs here onto this Venthyr Lantern. So will Golden Guardians, who are doing this pull slightly differently, using that Ring of Frost instead. This Venthyr Gargoyle or Lantern thing that you can see right on top of where Lighty is on the left, once that's activated, it will start sucking up the souls of
Жесть
everyone
какая.
and giving you a stacking 5% damage.
Там
and
у
healing
мага
buff.
какой-то опять
When you get 10
сумасшедший
mobs killed
дэмэдж.
there, that's 50% damage and healing for the next minute. Wow, Gargoyle actually making very short work of that pull.
Эти чуваки все
Slightly
залили,
smaller
а
pull
здесь
than what the
малыша
Golden
моба не
Golden
взяли,
Guardians
челики.
did, though, with the mob up here not included for Gargoyle and already killed for Golden Guardians.
Yeah, and we also see interesting comps coming out here with the Hunter for Gargoyle, which is the first time we see that Hunter coming out as well. Hunter really popular on live
Какую-то
servers, but
горгулью
not that
стащили
popular so
сбоку.
far in those keys. And we also saw a Moonkin for Golden Guardians, which is also a popular class on live servers, but the first time we see it here in the MDI. So we'll see how those two classes can do in this Sanguine Depths key. As we see another big pull come in by
Что у них
Golden
за
Guardians as they
сетап?
gather up some of these ticks
Маг,
and some of these
ДК,
bigger mobs here.
монах
One thing
опять.
to note
О,
about
сову взяли.
this smash, so the blue swirly on the ground, this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily
Сейчас
know.
купон
It
разваливать
doesn't
будет.
actually do impact damage. You can see the swirly on the ground where it jumps to. The umbral crash, as we can see right here. But the impact point, this swirly doesn't actually do extra damage, so you can just stand in it, and that's what we see those teams doing. They just all gather up within this disc bubble here of J.B, and they just don't move out of it because you don't have to, and therefore the brute also doesn't go away from the group, so everything just stays stacked up, and it's just better for the cleave damage.
J.B pioneering the third of 4 covenants now that exist in the game. The third one we've seen for the Disciplined Priest, though, he will be playing that Venthyr, getting access to the Venthyr lanterns for the Golden Guardians rather, whereas Gargoyle instead are going to be getting access to the Venthyr from their tank instead, the Venged Demon Hunter. So different ways to get to the same answer, which is making sure you have access to that Covenant-specific dungeon buff, and really goes to show
Да,
just
маг, конечно, заливает как сумасшедший вообще.
Just how many Covenants they can feasibly play if you need it for the dungeon-specific buffs, you know.
Опять, кстати, чуваки
скипают
красного мопчика.
Yeah, very interesting. We also see the Moonkin playing Kyrian, which is uncommon. We do see most Moonkins on live servers at least playing that Night Fae for the Convoke ability. But for AoE, Kyrian is better. So we see the Kyrian bond coming out where the Moonkin
Кстати,
basically bonds
да,
himself to another
Сова
player,
играет без
activating that bond every 1 minute,
споа
making
купона,
sure the
без
damage
конвоука.
is increased. And you basically
Там типа
sharing
играет
or
челик как
giving
Денчик,
each
он
other
типа связь у
damage
него
or portions
кириска,
of your damage for a little while.
который
So
усиляет
that's why
себя
we'll
и
probably
этого,
see
и союзника
the
твоего.
Moonkin and the Mage probably sharing that
На
damage a
какого-нибудь
little once
монаха
in a
или
while
на
once
этого будет
this bond
кидать.
is getting activated by
Или на мага
Yoda.
под камбурст.
So now we see
Будет
them pull the
жестко.
boss Crixus, and looks like they're not doing any sort of shenanigans here. They're not pulling any trash on top or anything like that, because this boss is very dangerous, as we've been talking about earlier, even unfortified.
Yeah, they have a tremendous amount of respect here for Crixus. I remember back during beta, we had a Keystone Masters tournament where this boss was just wiping its team over and over again for like 40 minutes, and that is something that this boss certainly has the potential to do. A lot of runs of this dungeon end here because of just how difficult this one is. They do have access, however, to Shadow Melds, which I think you can meld if you're targeted by the charge, which is something they can maybe do if they feel like they need to save a little bit of damage from that mechanic.
Потратили на красного моба вот здесь время, но они убивают босса быстрее. Ну, типа босса начали бить позже, но они бьют его все скорее раньше уже.
And does not play the Moonkin. He does play the Mage.
Да, на 10% хп больше выбили.
What kind of strat they have in
Прикольно.
mind playing that Moonkin, but I guess we'll see later. Maybe there's a specific pull they need the Druid utility for, because Druids do have quite a bit of utility that can be used in those dungeons. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, and maybe also something specific that they use the Hunter for on Gargoyle side. So we'll see. Once they finish off this boss, we can see them just
кстати,
hiding out
видели?
those orbs
Они их
from the
кайтят.
smash, because the boss was really low, so
Типа
they just
сверху не
decided
собирали.
to hide the boss away from the orbs instead of soaking them, so they don't have to deal with this AoE damage in the group.
Slight lead being taken here by Does Gargoyle Stream. They're about 10 seconds ahead of where Golden Guardians are.
Слева
With the
комнату
exact
взяли.
same trash count and boss kill timing, so actually a perfect time to compare these two teams. However, with different comps, they may have slightly different pulls in their future. As you can already see, slightly different stuff getting pulled here, as Golden Guardians in our smaller camera now have done a much bigger pull with the Gargoyle included, whereas Gargoyle are saving that for later.
Прикольно, кстати, все берут монаха, и он этим пальчиком парализует чувака.
Yeah, it looked like they also
Его
CC'd
убивать не
one
надо.
of the inspired mobs there, so they didn't have to deal with that aura, making sure they still can interrupt the mobs or can CC them. Otherwise,
Типа в
with the
тимфайт не
inspired
входит
mobs, of
этот
course,
моб.
you're unable to CC or interrupt or anything like that. And because of the oppressor in this group specifically, there's a bunch of very important casts that actually need to be interrupted.
Или он
Therefore,
приходит
we did see
позже,
the CC
непонятно
in.
что-то.
And now we saw Lydie break the CC
Ну
in the
здесь
oppressor
из
on
клетки
that
моб вышел,
inspired
его
one,
выбили
and
специально,
now they're
походу,
making
когда
sure
все
they can keep
погибли
that
уже.
one off with the Sentinel as well, so they actually can interrupt all of this. So this is, I would say, a pretty slow pull for them, but they probably just decided
Нужен
they have
опытный
to do
монах,
this
он
because
монахи
it's
играет.
inspired.
В
It's
комбат
just too
выводит эта
dangerous for
фигня
them
или
to
нет?
deal with on top of the rest of the mobs.
Yeah, I mean, they've still sped up relative to Gargoyle, who ended up doing this
Yeah.
in 2 pulls. Because Golden Guardians have access to that Moonkin, they were able to Force of Nature, and that locked the frontal bleed cast from the Sentinel in a nice direction that wasn't going to hit their tank or any of their other players on one of those trees. So as long as they were looking out for that, they were able to actually have Lighties survive that pull, whereas Gargoyle didn't have
Двух
access to the
мужиков с
Force of Nature
цепями
experience
притащили.
taunting that pull. And I think
Это
that Force
жесткий
of
пак,
Nature actually was
кстати.
a large part of what made pulling the Sentinel with the rest of that AoE feasible.
Yeah, that's very possible. Force of Nature definitely helping out for those big amounts of pulls. Now,
Две цепи
Inspiring actually
накинули.
makes the mobs immune to be taunted by Force of Nature.
Как же
so
похуй, чего на
that's also a
ДХ.
big reason probably,
Yeah.
why they didn't pull it in at the
Там
immediately.
просто две
And
цепи,
now
он
we see a
стоит,
double
авк бьет.
Overseer pull actually being pulled off by Golden Guardians, which
Ну,
seems to be very
персонаж.
dangerous, especially because they have so many stacks. Look at the debuffs here in the group frame. And not only does it decrease your damage, which just elongates this pull, but you also have those dread bindings coming out as well, which needs to be either line of sighted or outranged. Otherwise, it does a huge amount of damage. But they did now manage to finish it off. And yeah, just good job by Golden Guardians dealing with all
Чуваков
this
слева,
trash. And
походу,
they're more
фишка
coming out as
скипать
well,
постоянно.
so by the druid to make sure they're
Типа
speeding
они
up
решили,
the
что
next
походу
pull a
будут
little bit.
скипать
And now they're standing still,
постоянно
so it didn't do anything.
Yeah, so
Прайд,
there's
чтобы не
another
тратить на
Venthyr
него
lantern up
время.
here where you can see Gargoyle now on our big
Что ли?
screen and Golden Guardians. Both are going to be making use of this Venthyr lantern with a huge pull of small trash mobs from the little room off to the left, plus some of these bigger mobs from down the corridor. And this Venthyr lantern is very good to use.
Здесь
in
под
this
вентирскую
area.
эту
You'll see
фигню.
both teams getting a large
Пак
amount of benefit
огромный.
out of that. Although Gargoyle actually,
Дэмэдж
they
набрать.
have a tougher time even clicking that lantern because their Venthyr is their tank, and their tank can't really
True,
go
yeah.
and click that in the middle of this pull without being sent to the floor. Where he would actually join
То
James.
есть чуваки вот эти горгульи убивают постоянно. Прайд. Красного мобчика. А эти голды вообще не трогают. Типа они второго уже скипнули. Одного перед первым боссом и второго сейчас.
Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to mention that already happened to me as
Но они,
well
кстати,
is these
отстают.
sentinels, they
И
cast
сдох у них
a
кто-то один
quaking
раз.
effect underneath their character, and after a couple of seconds
Кто-то
it goes
фиданул
up,
разок.
knocks you into the air, and does a huge amount of damage if you stand in it. So you need to dodge it, but sometimes when you get quaking at the same time, your quaking animation is basically covering the floor animation, and you don't even realize it's underneath you if it lines up exactly at the same time. So that's definitely something they have to be careful about to make sure they know this is actually a sentinel cast and not their quaking effect, so don't get hit by that one. As we see Golden Guardians dealing with that Mist Dancer pool. The Mist Dancers can be quite tricky because they leave behind those mirror images of themselves, and whenever they cast that frontal, the mirror image will also repeat the frontal as well. So you want to make sure you position the mirror images in a line, as we can see them do here on Gargoyle's side, so it's still dodgeable. Otherwise, if they're all over the place, then it's incredibly hard to dodge the frontal from the mirror images.
Yeah, especially with two of them in the middle of the pull, as we can see here for Gargoyle. There's just a lot of
Жесть,
nonsense
там
going
два
on
челика,
their
которые постоянно
space
кастуют.
here, and they have
Кошмар.
such narrow space to work with. Because of the way Sanguine Depths works, there's just these
Два
narrow
танцора
corridors
были, которые
all
постоянно
throughout
вот
the
это
place, and it's so difficult to manage
выпады.
all these different mechanics if you are pulling multiple packs at the same time, given just how little space you have to play with. So great work actually by both teams so far in making these bigger pulls work in a dungeon where normally they are extremely punishing.
Yeah, definitely well done by both of these teams, and how close the teams really are. I mean, look at the percentage. We do see Gargoyles having that third
ДЦ берут,
pride
почему
mob
на
now
хайлевеле?
spawned with the 60% trash that they're at right now.
Ну, типа у ДЦ
While
очень
Golden
много
Guardians,
обилок
still have to
сейвящих.
deal with
Ну,
this
типа,
mini boss. This is something that we do
в
see
плане
a lot,
увеличения
just
твоего
because,
капа ХП, грубо
he
говоря.
does cast
То есть у него
frontal,
есть
which is
щит,
really
который
annoying, and
уменьшает
then there's just a
входящий
bunch of
урон.
neutrals that don't get
Есть
that
щиты,
percentage.
которые
It
увеличивают
just
опять
seems
твое
kind of
максимальное ХП.
inefficient, but it looks
Типа
like
в Вове
Golden
профит
Guardians
не
seem
выхиливать
to
дэмэдж,
want to pull that one for the
а
proc, and now it
типа
looks like
уменьшать
they're switching to the
входящий.
pride. So they proc the 60% one,
Ни у
are
друида, ни у
losing
шамана
away with
ничего
their nice
подобного нет.
abilities, and now shadow melting off the aggro from that one. So not playing the 60% pride,
И плюс,
while Gargoyle
типа
chose to
ДЦшка, он дамажит сам еще по себе.
Yeah, that
Типа немного,
is
но
definitely difference
на
between
высоком
these two
уровне это
teams here, and
решает, потому
it
что
keeps
какие-то
that
лишние
gap
секунды
really close. You
выиграешь.
can see these two teams operating at very similar percentages. Gargoyle a little bit ahead though, both in terms of count, and they actually still have that pride buff rolling, which is another advantage for them relative to Golden Guardians. So I would actually say Gargoyle now look like they may be, I don't know, 30 seconds or so in the lead here, but with Golden Guardians setting up some world markers, running around here, it looks like maybe they are setting up a massive pull to try and reclaim the advantage here.
Yeah, definitely looks like they're pulling something incredibly big. And we also see the inspired mobs here. This is really dangerous because you have the inspired, meaning none of these ads are actually seeable, so they have to be incredibly careful there.
О, они спулили босса с пачки. Какая же пизда.
Yoda is trying to get JP back up, but this is just a full team wipe coming in for Golden Guardians. What a disaster. There must have been something going wrong. I doubt they wanted to pull the boss on top of this.
Сейчас 1-1 будет.
Maybe they wanted to succeed the inspired and pull the trash with the boss, but not inspired.
Кто-то с боссом решил посраться просто так.
Really dangerous thing to do.
Вместе с мобами.
There's a lot of pulls, these MDI style pulls that when they work, they look great.
Это на ГГ уже похоже на самом деле. Потому что им сейчас прибежать, еще пачку надо убить.
About these teams is the ability they have to make those pulls work sometimes. What you don't usually see is the thousands of times it didn't work in practice, and we did get to see one of those times here, where that absolutely is basically what happened to Golden Guardians, is a massive pull that had a lot of setup, ended up just kind of completely falling apart because there were so many mobs, there's so much going on. But we may still see them.
Чтобы победить, нужно пройти инсту быстрее соперника. Чем меньше времени ты затратил, ну типа спидран. Это обычный спидран, только ключей. Грубо говоря. Здорово.
Probably not going to be able to replicate the same pull again. And yeah, we'll see what actually went wrong there. Maybe it was the inspired that they didn't manage to get the CC off, that they accidentally got into the pack, making Force of Nature not work. Anything that could have went wrong here, really, as Dratnos mentioned, just anyone getting hit in the back, any cast going through, that just causes an instantaneous wipe for Golden Guardians, unfortunately. Now, they're probably going to go slower, but we see Gargle, on the other hand, they are now proccing that 80% Pride, so the second to last Pride that they have to deal with. Doesn't look like they want to skip it, so definitely dealing with it, which is wise, because they need to deal with the third boss, and the third boss is really dangerous, as we mentioned a million times already, even though it is fortified, so that's why they probably deal with this Pride mob, making sure they have the extra damage to make the boss fight easy.
100 уже стоит, нормально.
Executor Tarvold guy up here in the ring. That
second boss, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely one of the most brutal bosses in the whole expansion. So having a Pride again, even unfortified, it makes so much sense. Covenant check though, real quick here. One thing I've noticed on the side of Gargoyle is their hunter is actually playing Kyrian rather than Faye. So access to that resonating arrow rather than the wild spirit.
Да, он основные же статы дает, самое профитное, по сути.
That is, I think, I'm not actually 100% sure what's going on to lead to that decision. I know actually on the side of Golden Guardians, Yoda was playing Hunter for Raid and played Kyrian for a lot of progression, so it's certainly a competitive choice there. We see a lot of it in PvP as well because it allows you to ignore line of sight. But I'm surprised a little bit to see it here in PvE.
Yeah, definitely interesting choice by Gargoyles on their side, but seems to be working out for them so far as they're fighting this second boss now. With that Pride buff, they do have a lot of cooldowns available. They used all of their offensives here at the start. We will also see Krona having the combustion ready again. The most important thing
кстати, у чуваков-то, у этих, у Гаргулей ММХант. Только сейчас заметил. А у чуваков слева у них БМХант. Воу.
Basically huge single target damage on that person. So just double the amount of damage that you need to heal as a healer if that ad is still alive. So definitely want to make sure you deal with that. And then whenever the ad dies, we see that huge pool dropping on the ground as well. That's why you just need to kite the boss backwards. And at the same time, you also need to dodge the beams that are coming in either on the outer side or on the inner side. So want to make sure you dodge them either way.
Golden Guardians here now, they are really playing to steal this from Gargoyle. If something goes comparably wrong for Gargoyle, as it did for Golden Guardians, they are going to get their lust on and start attacking Tarvold. But Tarvold already almost dead for Gargoyle, who also have an extra 13% count.
Это же БМ Хант, я не ошибаюсь. Там он типа ревайв пета у него. Или мне кажется. Или это у совы такие белки. Да и мем это я вижу справа, слева. А, это сова такая, понял.
And the last boss as well, and that is still a lot of potential problems for them.
Yeah, definitely still a lot of issues that this last gauntlet specifically can cause, because during that gauntlet you just have those bears spawn throughout the whole time until the boss is basically moving away. During that time, if anything goes wrong, it's really hard to recover.
Блин, я смотрю, типа, по билкам такой, ого, там, типа, ревайв пета, еще что-то, а это сова.
The healer can't drink necessarily, so it can definitely cause some issues. So we'll see how the gargoyles deal with that one, as they're now fighting that third boss.
Кстати, да, Шакен, слышишь этот? Там эхо показали идеальный сетап. Демон Хантер танчит, дамажит монах с этим, с ДК и с магом, и хилит ДЦ. Они там так разваливали, они 2-0 проехались.
To give the orbs to the rest of your team. And then we also see the swirlies coming out here, just need to be dodged. That also does some ticking damage on a group as well. One of the oppressors has been CC'd, so they didn't want to deal with all of them, and they probably also didn't need it for the trash percentage, so they might shadow melt off the aggro afterwards, or they just pull it into the boss later on. We will see how they want to deal with this last trash map here in this room.
Тут челики уже проиграли, тут 1-1 походу будет. А, и решили, чтобы догнать, типа, трэш с боссом убивают. Попробовать. Ну, что-то, мне кажется, у них не получится уже. 6 смертей ему уже боком выйдет. То есть они 30 секунд отстают из-за смертей. Помимо того, что они отстают еще и по процентам.
Something would have to go actually wrong for Gargoyle for this one to close back up.
Yeah, definitely. And then you also have the 30 seconds timer that got added to Golden Guardians because of those 6 deaths as well. So also something to consider. As Gargoyles are now about to finish off the boss, looks like they don't deal with the suppressor at all. So they're probably just going to shadow melt that one off later on once they decide to de-aggro it. And now we see how they deal with this trash. This trash can be decent.
Да я альтабнулся, пошел уже хайповать за БМ Ханта, а тут сова ебаная. Ты можешь быть БМ Хантом?
But it looks like they're just using their invis potion here. So they're just skipping past this trash completely. As you mentioned before, they don't need this trash since they're already up to 89%. Don't have to deal with it at all.
Вообще, да, кстати, это же супер жесткий пак.
They're in combat now.
No, as long as they don't step onto that bridge.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
Хантер
thankfully no
сдох.
one stepped into the bridge. No one triggered the event. So mode
Ясно ли?
can't
Иди
cast
сюда,
that mass
балбес.
resurrection. Good for them.
На
Otherwise,
ММ
it would have
Ханте.
been really difficult for them to get the Hunter back without being out of combat. So well done for them.
Yeah, now this is going to be a really interesting gauntlet for Gargoyle because they have that Venthyr player who can activate the Gargoyle in the second part here. They've killed off all the trash in the first part, and they're going to start moving Call. Once it gets below 90%, it will move automatically to the second set of trash, and that one features one of those Venthyr lanterns that we were talking about at the very start of this dungeon. But in order to activate that, you have to channel a cast for a bit. It's not as easy as it is for Golden Guardians, who have JB, who can just do that because healers can do whatever, you know, they
Я смотрю, кстати, у все на MDI играют за Альянс. Из-за билки ночных эльфов. Типа тупо 10 ночных эльфов. И у этих тоже так было. Слева справа челик.
Yeah, let's see how they deal with this next. It looks like they're just finishing off some of the Gargans here beforehand, before they engage this next fight.
So, I think they can drop combat.
Чё ты бухтишь?
Okay, it looks like that's not the issue, though.
Тебе лишь бы, блядь, крипов на меду бить стоять. И сраться. С пуджом пятеркой.
Sorry, you were saying?
I just wanted to mention that they might know that they're ahead at this
Ой,
point. I mean,
какой кошмар.
Death Gargoyle stream is that new MDI team. They haven't actually
Жизнь там мобов.
participated before in comparison to Golden Guardians who have been around.
Кошмар, как это умирает быстро.
They are allowed to watch the stream while competing. So it's very possible that they know that they're ahead and that they can play safe and, finish off the Gargans, get out of combat, make sure we get some mana back. But since it is the first time they're competing, they might not have the mentality to say, yeah, let's calm down and just do something, get out of combat or whatever. So that's something they have to consider as well. But looks like they're doing a really good job here as they finish off
Необоснованная душка, да.
What's the name?
The lantern buff.
The lantern, yeah, the lantern buff. There we go.
Yeah, so 5% stacking damage and healing across the whole team. They've got a full 10 stack that they are bringing into this. So 50% increased damage and healing for the last part of this gauntlet. Extremely helpful, as this is a pretty scary part of the dungeon. There's a lot that can go wrong here, and you're pretty low on cooldown.
Там чуваки еще и трэш убивали лишний.
Without dropping combat. They could have dropped combat there if they had wanted to by killing the Gargans earlier, but they decided against it. They decided to just keep going once they had figured out.
Типа эти челики, гаргульи, они
set up for that lantern, and that is going to be
наверху на кругу выбивали пак.
They are at 96%
А эти сейчас пак пасают. Третьего босса.
Skip this set of trash, and then they will be pulling the last room maybe to get the last bit of count that they need here. A little bit of threat being generated here. They'll probably wait for this quake, and then they're going to leap forward. Life grip combined with that as well to help create even more distance.
Жесть, какая мерзкая билка.
Trash pull. Bunch of Gargans here. Unlike in Halls of Atonement, Gargans are not scary in Sanguine Depths. In Sanguine Depths, actually, Gargans are among the least scary mobs. They don't do that nasty.
Они просто в инвиз стали, мобы отогрелись.
And so you can see they're able
Nice
to
обилка,
make
чё.
short work of those mobs. Killing off this last Houndmaster will spawn the final pride of the dungeon for Gargoyle, while Golden Guardians are still working on their gauntlet. Gargoyle are going to kill this because they've already melded. They can't meld it even if they wanted to, and then they will take that massive damage buff into the final boss fight, whereas the Golden Guardians still have yet to even spawn this pride.
Yeah, and they have everything available to them as well. They have the 3 battle races in case something does go wrong. They have the Bloodlust as well to get this extra damage on the boss. But this last boss is probably the easiest boss in this whole dungeon. It's really not as dangerous as any of these other bosses at all. So it should really not be a problem for Dusk Gargoyle stream to finish this off. But this Pride mob is causing some issues as mode is completely unfortunately. But now the Pride buff is gonna regen that mana for the healer. So no problem as they're now engaging General Call.
Это время 100%, потому что у них 3 из 4 боссов убито. Тут типа в ключах смысл в том, что тебе нужно 100% мобов убить, ну то есть какой-то процент мобов набить. Там за каждого определенного моба какой-то процент, то есть тебе нужно набрать 100 и убить всех боссов в инсте.
They are fairly easy to deal with, though, as you mentioned.
То есть сейчас они босяка убивают, и они закончили.
To stack up in that barrier used by the active ability of whoever is carrying the Naru there. And yeah, just 5% left on this boss's HP, and Gargoyle will even up this series 1-1 against Golden Guardians. A very impressive result for this team of relative inexperience compared to Golden Guardians, who are a very storied MDI team.
Yeah, definitely incredibly well done by Dusk Gargoyle stream. Once they finish up this boss, we're gonna go to the 3rd game, right? And it's gonna be a Mists dungeon, which is also a dungeon we haven't seen yet. JB going down for Golden Guardians here, just having some issues with that gauntlet, but at this point it's too late for them anyway, as Dusk Gargoyle stream getting that last AoE that they have to use the shield for, and now they're done. It is going to be 1-1 as Dusk Gargoyle stream wins Sanguine Depths.
1-1.
Indeed they do, and at the very beginning of this game, Brandon absolutely called it.
Интересно, это всю ночь будет идти или как?
Pretty advantageous to Dusk Gargoyle stream to be able to kind of blunt the lead that.
Мне чисто интересно посмотреть все карты было бы.
Trying to be able to develop and
Позалипать.
they just ran away with it after that one. They take that series, they take that game, and the series is now up to 1-1. It's gonna be pretty good.
Шанс. Я не понял, что ты бухтишь все время. Еще раунд смотреть ему. Недовольная рожа. Кайфово же. Что-то новенькое, интересное посмотреть. Ты все бухтишь. Здорово, Смейт. Да этот, MDI смотрим. Спасибо за фоллоу.
Достойный поступок. Славить Примаса священный долг всех, кто поклялся защищать Малдраксу.
Надо теперь ждать, пока следующая карта стартанет. Говорю, когда... Рафляр. Рафлярщик. Нашел недопонимание, проверяй. Самое, конечно, скучно, это что сейчас заняться. Минут 5-10, пока там перерыв. Это слишком, типа, короткое время, чтобы самому куда-то в институт сходить. Или кого-то босяку убить. По сути. Опа. Крыш, поехали. Что совов? Какие-то скипы свои показывает реплейчик. Что люди делали? Иду смотреть нарезки, проверяй. Да че не так с Вовом-то? Часик. Зависит от сервера. Типа на русском серваке только на типа на кириллице ники можно писать. Вот такие дела. Сервер разорван. Это пранк какой-то? Да, не такой плохой кровавый катакомба данжик на самом деле. Есть похуже. Там вон чуваки, которые против эхо боролись, их чумакост отхуярил. Вебит прям в голосину сидел орал. Они там сдохли пару раз на чумакости, и для них всего закончилось. Они там первого босса добивают, эхо уже заканчивают. Инсту полностью. Лично. Сейчас сдох из этих вылетов, да? Красиво. Парам-парарам, парам-пам. Можно любую инсту так подставлять, да, походу? Кому что не понравилось.
Кстати, WOW лучшая игра Blood Trail.
Получается так. Да не, типа Вов на самом деле кайфовая игрушка, просто ты ни хера не понимаешь, что на экране происходит, пока в нее не зайдешь. В этом плане она очень специфичная. То есть, если ты там, я не знаю, условный шутер любой практически открываешь, будь то КС, либо еще что-то, ты визуально понимаешь, что на экране происходит у человека. Это типа, по сути, минус всех стратежек, можно сказать, и у таких жанров. Типа ММОшек, всего остального. Потому что если ты не шаришь, ни хера не понятно, что происходит.
Чтобы отбить атаку, нам нужна артиллерия. Помоги привести орудие в боевую готовность.
Не понял сейчас. Warzone, я уже вылетаю. Что там происходит? Ну, там Next Insta уже.
Interesting to see that Hunter entered Moonkin again. And a huge pull coming in by both of the teams, as both of them actually also use their offensive CDs as well. Double villagers here. We see the full moon unfortunately proccing on one of the off targets. Oh, how unfortunate.
You do hate to see that. On the
Фига
other
они
hand,
быстро стартанули.
at least you got a full moon in your convoke. That can't be. You can't complain too much about that, right? It's not a guaranteed.
Тут, кстати, боссы усиленные.
Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But yeah,
That is
Golden Gargoyles,
true.
or Golden Guardians rather, just shredding this first pull as that last villager. I was completely mistaken.
Ща в игре камень нажму.
Make it look easy.
Сорян.
Not a problem at all. And that is going to get them a huge injection of count right at the start of the dungeon. Not 20% yet, though, so they still haven't spawned their very first Pride, as they are now going to use that Imprison to get past the next set of mobs here. We've got Mind Soothe coming out, followed by... Okay, yeah, so they're going to Mind Soothe, and then they're going to use the Night Fae to get into this little mushroom patch. This has several different mushrooms. Tasty Tough Shrooms, which give you 10%
У этих
stamina,
челиков такой же
or
сетап
Savory
с
Stat
совой.
Shrooms, which give you 10% stats. And the 10% stats, 10% main stat, tends to
Если
usually
что,
be a
там
little bit
опять
more
сова,
valuable.
это
So
не
you see
БМ
everybody picking up one of those. They're going to mind control
Не
the
понял
entire
сейчас.
mob here, and it's going to go and just
I like
turn
it.
its back here and get hit for a lot of damage. They need to make sure they break the mind control before it dies, so they can actually
Ты
tag
что-то
it
против
down.
БМ-хантов
And yeah, you
имеешь?
can see there's that mind control break. That thing is going to have a huge amount of threat on JB, but it's going to die very quickly, and then the interrupts are going to come out. So that's going to get them a nice little
Ноль
hit of
варваков.
free
Ну,
count
в
at the
варваках,
cost of
варваки
sitting
не
there
такие
AFK
крутые в
for 15
ключах.
seconds. And now they're going to go in to these two bow breakers.
Варваки
These
были
mobs are nasty. Once they get
на
pushed to a
first
50%
run
health, they will do a little tantrum
в
pass
данжах.
that
Ну,
does a
типа
lot
в
of
этих,
damage
ты
to your
понял.
whole group. If you
В
push
рейде.
both of them at the same time,
Вот там
that
варваки
can
и
do a lot of
бурили.
damage in a live key setting. Of course, in the MDI, these teams are able to handle it. As you can see, Power Word Barrier going to be coming down to help make that group damage a little bit more manageable.
Ну, челика крутой геймплей. Старфол,
So
Starfall
interesting to see
бежит.
that they chose to do the
Ну,
mind
точнее,
control on
Starfire.
the Guardian
Как же
side, while
Шкипер
Las Argos
пытается
Stream just ended
надавить на
up
своих
using
зрителей
the
сегодня
cage from the
Blood
Demon
Trail.
Hunter to succeed the inspired Soul Cleaver and
В
deal with the
смысле?
rest of the mobs. So we'll see which strategy ended up being better, because of course mind controlling means you have to be AFK for a little while, lose a little
Вообще
bit of
никогда
time,
никого
but
давлю.
they get the extra percentage from the mob
while Gargoyle Stream is just cleaving down the Soul Cleaver now with that.
Я могу
pride.
надавить
So I
только
would
на
say,
банку с кетчупом, если
theoretically,
что, и все.
yes, Gargoyle Stream does have the faster strat, but
Это мой
realistically,
максимум.
they're not on the box yet, while Golden
Сдались
Guardians
вы мне,
are.
люди
And
ебаные.
one thing to
Давите на
note
себя
is
сами.
Демон
regarding that
Варлок
Golden
это на
Guardians
финал
did
вместе
save
с
the
Халилом.
Bloodlust, so they do have it available for this boss. While
Поехали.
yes, Gargoyle Stream used it on the very first pull, so
С
they
Холли
have to
Престол.
finish off this boss without Bloodlust. Now, it is tyrannical, so it can actually be decently difficult to one-phase this boss on an 18. So we will see how much damage those teams can do to the boss once they finish off the ad and get the damage on Ingra.
Yeah, this boss with Tyrannical active, it can take several more phases than if Fortified were instead the affix. Especially, you don't have enough to kill it in your first cooldowns, and then it starts really taking a long time. As you can see here, we're just about to get into that push for Gargoyle. They're actually going to get that Fear cast before they push Droman below 20% health, where he becomes friendly for a time. And he applies a damage taken increase to Ingra Malik, the main boss. That is what's going to be stacked up with Combustion, Elysian Decree, Resonating Arrow. All of these cooldowns are going to come out at the same time. Weapons of Order, huge burst damage being popped by Gargoyle. Only able to get Ingra Malik to about 50% health. 50% health-ish is fine here. They should be able to get it on the next go. It's really important that you don't have 3 phases. 3 phases would be very slow, but yeah, you can see Golden Guardians with all the advantages we talked about. They were able to get Ingra Malik down here to about 20% before the damage.
Там СВ 20к ДПС. Охренеть.
Tunnel boss. That is what their strategy is going to be. It's just full damage on boss. They're not going to get another Droman phase. This is important you get this done in time. If you miscalculate here, the boss is going to apply an 80% damage reduction after a time. And if that happens, then things get really, really slow. So hopefully they're able to kill it.
Если босса не успеет добить, он нажмет обилку на 90% уменьшения урона, придется опять дерево хуярить.
Yeah, and we can see the difference in damage here as well for this boss specifically. Moonkin very strong for this boss because of that, because of the cooldowns, huge amounts of burst damage with the Celestial Alignment, and the Convoke as well. As Yoda did switch to Night Fae now, he played Kyrian previously. Night Fae just provides a lot more single target damage compared to the Kyrian, which provides more AoE damage. So definitely well done with the choice of Covenants here to make sure they get this boss done in one cast. But they do get the damage reduction, it looks like. This is really bad for Golden Guardians here. They just barely didn't have enough damage to finish up the boss.
Не могут добить. Засрано уже.
To kill now would have been a much better decision to kill the Droman instead, who's already incidentally gotten cleaved down to 60% health or so, and should keep going down now for Golden Guardians as this phase starts to get quite nasty. They're going to use a battle res on Shakib. Ice block coming out for Lip, but yeah,
кого-то резали уже сдох.
Also doing a lot of nasty things to the group as fears start now getting spammed by the boss, and this is really the boss saying, "Hey, you
просто все засрали, я не видел никогда такого."
50% mana and health on JB, so he's got enough mana to keep them going. But yeah, Ingra Malik's health.
Они вот по ложке ковыряют.
As Gargoyle are also having to do a third phase on the boss. Ingra Malik finally goes down for Golden Guardians, or as Cauterize is procced by Lip, so they're able to escape here a little bit faster.
Не, там типа под каждую инсту определенные.
Both teams had a different thing in mind when they envisioned how that fight was going to go.
Definitely, yeah. It looks like Golden
Определенные
Guardians
аффиксы.
were counting on this one phase.
У них сейчас типа усиленные боссы. Моб вон желтенький не дает кастовать и что-то еще.
And it really just didn't work out exactly the way they wanted, but they still managed to finish off the boss, having to use this one rest though. So they're down one battle rest. They can release though because they have the night phase, so they managed to unlock that graveyard there, that spawn point, so they can get back there immediately. And now we are in the maze. So now we'll see how those players play the maze. So for the tournament integrity, the way it works is that both of the teams will have the exact same maze, but they don't know the maze beforehand. So they still have to do the odd one out game here, so they'll still have to figure out the correct way, but both of the teams will have the same one.
Yeah, so this is a very cool little game that you play in the maze here that's also replicated on the boss. There are going to be 4 symbols that you can identify by walking.
Было бы прикольно какой-то интересный сетап необычный посмотреть, но тут, конечно, такого не будет. Люди сидят, задрачивают серьезными этими вещами. Ну, им и так и надо. Им тут нельзя рофлить.
each of those characteristics, there's
Это
going
не
to be
наш
one
Discord в
that is
4 утра.
unique. So there might be one leaf and 3 flowers. There
Здесь
might be one
типа
empty
сетка
shape and
турнирная,
3
бабки
full
на,
ones, and
думаю,
whichever is
хорошие.
that one is always the correct path to go or the correct ad to kill during the boss here. As you can see, they're able to identify that pretty quickly. It's actually pretty punishing if you identify the wrong one. If you try to walk through a wall that's incorrect, you get sent back to the very beginning of the maze, which is a serious time loss. So,
Так Аркан-Маг на самом
I'm
деле не
looking
так
forward
плохо.
to the first time we get to see that in the MDI. Hopefully for these teams it won't be in this match, but I
Как
am
ты
hoping we get
думаешь?
to see it sometime. It would be quite funny.
Мы же с Артемом ФНГ ходили в инсты, он очень много выдавал.
Until you're out of combat. So even if you know the correct
Все
way,
время
you still
либо
can't
топ-1, либо
move
топ-2
on
по
until
ДПС.
you're done fighting the trash pack, or you somehow else manage to get out of combat, like we see the Shadow Melts coming in by the Golden Guardians here. One more thing to mention is that Moonkins are probably the very best class to deal or to figure out the maze, because they can cast while moving when they have Stellar Drift, the talent. So whenever you have Starfall up, you can cast and move around at the same time, while everyone else is losing damage, right? Your Disc Priest is going to lose damage if he has to move around. Of course, the melees want to
Там
be
у Роги,
melee
по-моему,
range to do
какой-то
damage,
спек
and the
есть
mage is losing
совсем
damage as well. So
говнецо.
having that
Один.
Moonkin actually a little bit of a
Я не
time
помню,
saver
как
as
он
well, because
называется.
Moonkin can just walk around, figure out the symbols, and then figure out the path, while on the other side we have Duskargo's Stream, who don't really have that Moonkin or that class that doesn't lose any damage from moving around. So a little bit of a damage gain for Golden Guardians here by having the Moonkin.
And it looks like something may have
Ветер
bugged with the maze
Ветер
for
демонолоков подъехал.
Gargoyle Stream here, such that it's not going to be possible for them to complete the maze. And that, I believe, is potentially going to be a remake here of this second game, unfortunately, based on what's happened there. I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll have to see if that ends up coming through. But yeah, this maze section,
Как же они разгадывают
it's a
загадки,
really
а?
difficult one. If you get the wrong pathing, if you get the right pathing, it can be quick and easy. So it's a huge amount of variance from run to run. And these teams have to be ready to deal with whatever it throws at them, because of course they don't know what the maze is going to be going into the run. For both teams, it's going to be the same, but it's not always the same from run
Чувак
to run.
обосрался.
There is the
На
teleport
Демон
back.
Хантере,
Oh,
ай-яй-яй.
actually, was that them
I'm
using
not
the
sure
wrong
if this-
maze?
I think so. I don't think this was intended, actually. I think they actually just took the wrong one.
Oh no. Okay, yeah, so it
But
looks,
it's
it
gonna
looks like the
be-
remake is coming through, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna be going to a remake for it. Unfortunately, there is a bug with the maze causing it to just make it so you cannot progress whatsoever. And for our rules, if there are these bugs that are occurring that
Whoa.
are the fault of the game, that they're not able to be able to continue the dungeon,
Инста
and not able to
забагалась, а они
progress, it
выигрывали.
will result in triggering a remake. So we're gonna be getting all the characters reset, give everybody a moment to be able to kind of put it all together, but let's start looking at what we've been seeing so far here, Tettles, out of just at least the opening of the dungeon.
I mean, there was a lot of really good stuff that we saw prior to the maze section itself. I mean, the first half of this dungeon,
Инди-компания.
the first boss is always the most tedious. Like the double villager pull.
Еще
is
подумаешь,
really,
маленькая
really
инди-компания.
scary. And then you
На
did see
MDI забагалась.
I feel like it was a little bit risky of an assessment for them to say that we can burn Ingram Mallock at 25% on Tyrannical. You saw, like, because the boss
I've
does
seen
get
some
an
groups
80.
that do that.
I mean, it
Голос
made it
вообще,
even
на
faster,
самом
right?
деле.
Like, they were able to get through it and they didn't have to kill that tree, so I don't know, it was maybe a good call.
Это был
I
батя
mean,
Пака.
they're playing a boom can-
Ладно, то они пока инсту
Because of
рисуют,
it,
пойду
I'm
себе еще
pretty
что-нибудь
sure
возьму
it's
с
not
кухни.
fast.
I think you just blame that on
Очень
bad
лучше,
invoke
кстати.
RNG and you're pretty excited to get a second
I
shot at
think,
landing
yeah,
some
he got
full
the full
moons
moon in the
there.
first one, unfortunately, so yeah.
If he gets a moon on
Wrong
the second
full
one,
moon.
it's all over.
I was gonna say that they've practiced it to such an extent that they got to know that, you know, the different variables of what can happen if they have to muscle through it at different times, and they did well. I mean, they almost died, but I like seeing the positioning as well for some of the fear bombs that were coming out, doing a good job to make sure they weren't getting kind of like backed into any sort of corner and then just getting any of the puddles splashed on top of them
Dude.
or anything. So
I love the mind control technology. I thought that was
Yes.
really cool. MCing the
But was
inspiring
it
mob.
faster?
I don't
thought
know,
it was cool
probably
as well,
not.
but it probably wasn't even faster.
I would wager it's probably not, but it's cool.
It was
I mean,
cool
that mob
though,
is
yeah.
really annoying though, because that mob applies a buff to itself that makes it so it like leeches on auto attacks, and that can make it so that it really lasts a long time if you're not careful. So having it just get killed by the other mobs in that pack That's a pretty big win-win. I think what
Well-
Gargoyle did with that as well, of keeping it CC'd and then killing it with Pride and then killing Pride with Boss, that kind of chain pull of a bunch of stuff that you can't really pull a lot of stuff with, but you can kind of do each of them with the second half of the next one. You know, that kind of strategy looked like it was also really fast. So I think that both teams are going to be really excited to get another shot at that first boss and try and do it faster, because I think that there's probably time to be saved for each team if that goes a little bit more according to plan.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things is tensions running high, maybe a bit of nerves, especially for, you know, the side of Gargoyle, right, Nagura, because they're often a lot more new to this competition. They've got to be really excited to kind of get that second chance back and just hope for a much cleaner run.
Definitely. I mean, they've been playing really clean the second game, and now having that second chance for this dungeon, I really think it's just gonna get the nerves off a little, because you always know when the first key you play is going to be a little bit chaotic and you need to warm up, right? And so having an extra chance on this dungeon might actually just give them the edge and just make them play a little bit better than they did last time. Maybe not make any of those mistakes on the first pull that they did. So we'll see how it goes for them this time around. And hopefully the Golden Guardians not making the same mistake again by not proccing a full moon on the first boss. I mean, come on, Yoda.
Tails, do you have any guide updates for that? Able to help them with their problems?
None to be had. Although I did see his trees accidentally getting launched into like the middle of nowhere during the burn, but we've all been there. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like the issue was that like it wasn't necessarily just the Convoke RNG, but once the boss does put that shield up, he starts pulsing insane AoE damage, and we saw them Lip caught it and was like, are they about to wipe right here? I actually was worried that they were about to wipe at the very end.
Well, yeah, that's one of the scariest things as well from that boss fight, and even from like a priest perspective that you're going into it, is people just get spread out all over the place from the fears. Any of the different puddles on the ground start kind of separating everybody. So next thing you know, I mean, everybody starts in the middle of the room or something like that, or you have melee who are kind of tucked into that cubby where the bosses are starting at, and then the next thing you know, you guys are on opposite sides of the room. Mage is cauterizing, you're about to die yourself, and then you're just trying to scramble to be able to put everything together. So
you try and life grip your friend out of the danger.
Yeah, there we go. The life grip.
They have the silencer on because you killed them with life grip 5 times during raid. You gripped them off the edge or whatever, and so that doesn't work. And it's just
Что произошло? Там типа есть баг, которому уже который был еще на первой неделе, как аддон вышел, что ты типа открываешь правильный ход по инсте, но туда пройти не можешь. Ты туда забегаешь, и у тебя типа выкидывает, как будто ты неправильно идешь. И типа вся инста багается, ты дальше пройти не можешь. Спасибо игрокам на MDI, что помогают маленькой инди-компании пофиксить баги, которым уже 7 недель.
Yeah, the pulls at the end I think are going to come down to making sure that they can get kicks allocated on as many of those worms as they possibly can. There's like a big shield and a large heal. I'm pretty sure that they can only pull 2 of those guys at a time. So I think there are like 3 packs that they can merge together after they do like, I think they're probably going to skip the 3 mobs straight after Mistcaller, and then they're going to grab the right landing pack and then like pull like up and to the left, if that makes any sense. And then they're
makes sense to me, Tattles.
Plant right there and be able to DPS down all the mobs very rapidly.
You have a whiteboard, don't you? Can you like draw us a map really
What about the inspiring mobs? What about the inspiring?
My whiteboard is preoccupied with something else right now, but we're currently showing the intro to
Thankfully,
Mists.
we moved away from your. Oh, there it is.
See, this is the current state of the whiteboard, but
absolutely love it.
Yeah, you
Let's
can
see
see
that
that
balance
on
druid.
stream.
Don't get us nerfed.
Let's see that balance druid on display. Hoping for the big Convoke. The remake of Game 3 is now underway, decided between Golden Guardians and does Gargoyle stream.
Yeah, and both teams now getting that big first pull underway once again. This worked out nicely for each of them the first time. So they are going to try and replicate the success they had with this pull. And maybe for Gargoyle even shave a little bit more time here. Last time I think I remember Golden Guardians finishing this pull more quickly, but this time it looks like Gargoyle... okay, so Gargoyle have to pull in this mob later. whereas Golden Guardians were able to somehow do it with the other mobs, even though it has that inspiring aura around it. And I believe that is how Golden Guardians have shaved a couple seconds off this pull relative to Gargoyle.
Yeah, that's exactly what makes their pull a little bit faster here in Golden Guardians. They just don't care about that inspired mob. They just nuke it all down at the same time. Well, the Gargoyle
Да, Рюран.
makes it a little bit slower or
Я в
safer,
личку им
rather,
написал, что
by
ты
just
типа не
assuming
успел
that the
посмотреть
inspired
пару
mobs, or at least
моментов,
not pulling it in,
чтобы с
in
пугами
CSC
потом
there, but just
исполнить.
not grouping it up with the rest of the trash to make sure they
Сейчас
still
переиграют
have
по-быстрому.
CSC on everything and making it a little bit easier for them. So now they grabbed the mushrooms here with the Night Fae ability that enables this area here. And now we see the mind control again, used by JB here on that priest, making sure the soul cleaver goes down. And these trash mobs are actually incredibly dangerous for the tank, because not only do they do debuff on the tank that increases your damage taken, but it also does a huge initial damage as well that casts. And as you mentioned before, also has the debuff on himself that he heals on auto attacks. So definitely very dangerous mobs. And you also have the casters who randomly cast soul bolts on your group, which also can cause some issues, especially if the bolts go on the same person. So can instantly one-shot a player if two of the
Как они
casters
так
go.
ваншотнули моба майнд-контролем?
There
Интересно.
are those tantrums which they're going to use the barrier for on the side of Golden Gargoyle or Golden Guardians, as Gargoyle does it as well. Man,
Типа они
I've
просто
been
моба на
saying
моба
Gargoyle
агрят,
a lot
он
today.
приручается и в него типа дэмэдж
I
начинает
like it
ходить,
though, I like
как
it.
других мобов, или как это
This
работает.
is really pretty rough. As Gargoyle are a little bit faster
Затаймил
actually getting
тумана,
into
понял,
the
Мишань.
as Golden Guardians
Пишу им, пусть
just
скипают
about
эту
ready to
инсту.
pull here. Once they finish off these last two mobs, they have that pride which they are going to skip. Okay, but Gargoyle has to kill that pride, right? Guardian's actually also pulling Pride. Okay, so they're Pride onto boss, whereas Gargoyle is killing Pride with the Inspiring mob instead before they go on to boss. This is where Golden Guardians, again, saving a little bit more time by finding ways to deal with the Inspiring mob, not by itself. We saw it with the first pull, the way that they were able to pull rather than CCing the Inspiring mob. And here they were able to just mind control it to get it killed right at the start of the pull, rather than having to imprison it and then kill it later at the end of the pull. That's going to get them onto this boss even more quickly. Going to make sure they have Pride here as, JB can drop so low.
Yeah, that was actually so close, but didn't manage to finish off the Pride mob here. And one nice thing to see as well was that JB managed to get a very quick mana, like,
Какой же жесткий геймплей у совы. Starfall, Starfall, потом гнев, гнев, еще гнев. Ох. Starfire, Starfire, еще Starfire, и еще. Сосать. А теперь гнев пошел. Не.
But he did manage to just sit down for a couple of seconds to get that extra mana that he needed to heal that Pride on the boss. And now he's got the Pride buff, which regens the mana. So let's see if they can have the damage this time around. As they have the Bloodlust used and the Celestial Alignment and the Convoke being popped. And there's a full moon. Good job, Yoda. Well done. See? He learned. And this time they're going to be making the damage for sure with that full moon coming in by the Moonkin.
Yeah, Ingram Malik here is going to be at about 23% when it loses the damage taken increase. They should be able to nuke it down here. Last time it was only a matter of 3% that separated them from a much faster kill. So with a little bit more damage this time, I think they're going to be in good shape. And yeah, it may have well come down to that full moon that Yoda landed during the Convoke that time. You know, that thing does a lot of damage. You can look at the damage meters right now. Yoda is just so high up there as a result of the strength of that Convoke lining up with the damage taken increase.
Yeah, but it looks like they're playing it safe because I'm
В
pretty
прошлый
sure
раз
last
челы
time they came out
убивали
with
сразу
this
босса,
the
теперь
boss is
убивают
also
моба,
approximately
чтобы
at
босса
20%.
добить, потому что они знают, что им не
It
хватает.
looks like they're
Блин,
just
нечестно, когда у тебя
choosing
инфа
to
уже
kill
есть.
at this time, just playing it safe. And I think this is a wise decision because not even the full moon managed to
Пока
get
самому
them
не приходится считать, ничего
low
делать.
enough on that boss's HP. So they just decide to play it safe, finish off the Droman again, and then they definitely are gonna have enough damage. Well, that's Gargoyle Stream on the other hand, since they don't have the huge amount of single target burst as Golden Guardians have, they definitely have to kill the Droman again as they just did. They now have the intermission phase again, but on 70% they should be fine. Like 17% definitely seems like a percentage they can use to finish off the boss. So definitely don't need a third phase on their side.
Yeah, Golden Guardians, meanwhile, making their way to the maze after killing that first boss. They are going to grab a little bit of extra trash from the side here, pulling it in over the wall into this pull, making it a little bit less inefficient to fight those two mobs by themselves. But this does add quite a bit of difficulty to the pull, as you now have those rampages knocking back all your melee players. Pretty rough spot to be in. As you can see Gargoyle just finishing off that first boss just in time to beat that damage reduction phase.
I feel so bad for Shakib. Just can't be in front, can't be in the back. There's storming everywhere. He's just getting knocked into the air here and there. It's really not nice for melee players having the storming affix here on top of having all of the other trash abilities as well that you need to be careful about. So Shakib doing a good job staying alive as they're moving on in the maze. They do use a cage on this inspired mob. And as we mentioned before, the maze is random, so they have to play the maze properly with the odd one out. They have to figure out which one the correct door is to move on. But both of the teams are going to have the exact same maze, so they still have to play it, but it's not going to be unfair because both of the teams have the same one.
Yeah, this area with these storming tornadoes, you can see, even for their range players, pretty brutal. This combination of affix was chosen by you, the viewers, over on the @WoW Esports Twitter. A poll was ran for this dungeon, and these two affixes were the champions up
Прикольно.
against several other
Мне
options.
говорят,
So
что
all of
аффиксы
this
выбирали
misery that's being
люди
inflicted upon the Golden Guardians
голосованием.
storming tornadoes. It really is all your fault that's watching. Everybody that voted in that poll causing this pain for Shakib. So don't worry, I'm sure he doesn't carry a grudge. Yeah.
All right, so it looks like both of the teams are actually very, very even at this point. We see both of them dealing with that inspired mob here that both of the teams did CC while they were fighting the rest of the trash.
Че, опять
and now they're
забагалось?
finishing it off by itself. Golden Guardians slightly ahead. Looks like they took
They
the
failed the
wrong...
maze.
Или они обосрались?
Yes, Golden Guardians. Oh no, this is the second time they're failing the maze. Hopefully they do manage to find the correct way this
Окей.
time. Looks like this is it.
Блин, если бы сейчас забагалось 2 раза подряд, это что-то вообще в
Yeah,
голосе
if they're
было.
gonna make mistakes like this is gonna cost them valuable time. So they want to make sure they're not making any more of those mistakes on the maze.
I think I may have seen that happening for Gargoyle as well, just briefly before we went full screen here on Golden Guardian. So yeah, the maze actually turning out to be, when there's so much healing and damage and stuff going on, there's so little brain power left to use on the puzzle that is not enough left over for them, as they're going to meld to drop combat so that they can get through to the next section of the maze and then tag this pride and bring it into this next pull so that they can keep the prideful buff in this area. And this maze in particular is so different than any other thing we've ever seen in the MDI. The hugely random nature of it means that these teams need to be ready to react to so many different ways they could get through the maze. And making a snap decision about, okay, we're going to meld here, and then we're actually going to tag that pride and bring it into the next pull after we've opened the door. That is the sort of thing that it's really hard to have a good idea of what you want to do with those different pride spawns in all these different places. Making that decision quickly and making the right decision is going to be hugely rewarded. As you can see, they do get that pride buff now into this Toad mini boss. The Toad, one of 3 mini bosses you can encounter in different grooves.
Кстати, у этих чуваков одна смена была.
Compared to the
Golden
Dragon or the Hydra,
Guardians
which can
сейчас
both be
нету.
quite nasty for the tank. This one leaps around a little
Здорово,
bit, but
Драгоница. Да, ну
relatively
ДХ
easy
слишком
dodge.
поломанный какой-то.
Yeah, one more thing to mention about this maze is the fact that in the MDI, they're speedrunning the dungeons. They want to run the dungeon as quickly as possible and want to deal with the trash as fast as they can. But this maze takes a decent amount of time for you to run to each symbol, making sure you know where the exit is. So if you kill the trash incredibly quickly, you might actually not have the time to find the correct way. And then maybe you're rushing it and you're taking the wrong one, which we've already seen happen for Golden Guardians here. So killing the trash incredibly fast might not actually be the best way to deal with this maze, because what's the point killing everything instantly when you then have to walk around and find the exit? Then you might as well just save one of the cooldowns for the next trash group. So you're not basically wasting the time having to find the exit, and you can find it while the mobs are dying.
Yeah, that is absolutely something that can be helpful. But, theoretically it is slower than just doing it right perfectly and quickly, you know, and that's always what these teams are going to aspire to do, right? They're always going to try and make it work.
Почему они бьют нашу жабу? Потому что даже наша жаба попала на MDI, и мы нет. Аффиксы там типа каждый инс меняются. Сейчас ветерки, усиленные боссы и что-то еще.
Just when they thought the storming was over and they could relax a little bit in melee, one of their group mates just brutally murders them with the boast from the Pride.
Yeah, so it looks like they're just some of them even getting stunned as they were running around here. Did manage to find the exit. It looks like. Never mind.
No!
It was the wrong one again. So they will have to go back and find the correct. Yeah, see, this is the thing, right? They're going around trying to find the exit, but because they have to deal with the Pride at the same time and having to dodge all of those debuffs, making sure JB has to heal the group, right? He can't just walk around freely looking for the exit when he just needs to heal everyone, making sure everyone stays alive. So yeah, just not finding the correct exit here, unfortunately. Now they did it as they're moving
Там
on.
почему у вторых челика проценты, кстати, не идут?
Looks like the other team has some issues, so we'll see how we're gonna be proceeding with that one. They will tell us shortly, but we now see Golden Guardians engaging Mistcaller. Mistcaller, definitely a boss that you can't necessarily speed up as much, just because the boss has this intermission phase where you play the same game as in the maze. You have those 4 ads spawning, and you need to kill the correct one, depending on the odd one out, so you just have to find the unique
Мамахан в другом составе. Ну, совет сложно решать загадки. У него там на панельке-то 3 кнопки. Starfire, гнев и этот. И ковенантская хрень. На этом все. Ты говоришь, загадки какие-то считать.
So in theory, you could nuke the boss before the cast goes through, but that is very unlikely that that's possible on a tyrannical key. Maybe on fortified if you just save a bunch of burst damage and you get lucky with the cast sequence that the boss is doing, which would save you a huge amount of time if you can dodge that last intermission phase, but it's just not going to be possible on tyrannical.
With a comp like this, it's maybe one of the best comps. I think it starts at 10% is when the cast starts. And
да, 10% она кастует последний раз.
But you know, you have a Windwalker with Touch of Death.
Они не смогут бурстануть. Типа этого босса можно экзекьютнуть, а он 10% начинает кастовать. Типа опять вот этот, угадай, какого моба убить. Это можно скипнуть, если убить босса. Но они типа говорят, что на тиранике это почти невозможно сделать, потому что... Потому что, типа, слишком много хп у усиленного босса получается. 10% никак не пробить.
I mean, yeah, it's possible. I do think that would be more of a fortified strat, though, because if you save all of your CDs for this moment specifically, and then you don't make it, then you waste a lot of time, right? Just using all of your cooldowns right before the boss dies, then you don't have your CDs ready for the next trash pack, and so on. So we'll see if a team wants to do that, but I do think it's going to be a pretty huge time save, especially for this dungeon specifically, because as you mentioned, this is going to be a dungeon where lots of, like, it's not very difficult in itself.
Нет, что-то хп даже не боится у босса. Я понял.
Try big pulls here and there, and just add more and more things to the pulls and make
Там кастер, который за второй командой должен следить, куда-то пропал у них. Нет инфы вообще о второй команде, что-то голос. Поэтому и проценты перестали капать.
This time we didn't see it for the Golden Guardians as they're playing this third intermission phase.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a little bit too much health to be feasible. It definitely on tyrannical, but I think even on fortified, it's going to be tough. But it's certainly something that I expect these teams will have experimented with and will have tried using all their cooldowns to skip that last phase. As Mistcaller does go down for Golden Guardians, they'll be making their way now to the final trash segment of the dungeon. There's 63% count right now. They're going to need to get quite a bit of this trash from the end of the dungeon. What they can do is pull the 80% pride, kill that, get the pride buff, kill the last boss, and then they can go and finish.
Ну, у них
off the
сейчас
rest of
очень
their count if
простые
they
эти
wanted
штуки
to.
будут.
By doing that, they would avoid
Ой,
having to
не
kill
будет
that last pride
левитацию.
afterwards as well,
Поехали.
having to do a skip of some kind. Looks
Чтобы
like it's going to
скипнуть
be
мобчиков.
slow fall though used here to allow Lighty to just skip over that pack entirely, and the entire team is going to skip
Прикольно.
that first 3-pack. That 3-pack is usually pretty easy, but
Я
it
помню,
doesn't include that
типа я
mod
также прыгнул, на меня
and so if you're gonna pull it with other
этот
stuff,
маг
that can really
накастовал, а я
add
летел по
extra
прямой, не в
difficulty
бок.
to your run.
Ну, просто типа накастовал, а по дефолту прыгаешь вперед, и по мойку улетаешь.
Gargoyle Stream has been encountering that bug with the maze on Mr. Tyrannus Eye. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to allow Golden Guardians to be able to complete their run, make sure that they get it all finished up, and we're going to count it more as a time trial, and then we're going to make sure does Gargoyle Stream will be able to compete off broadcast.
Как этот чел живет вообще?
Complete their run, and then we'll have a winner based off of the best of those 2 times. So unfortunately, won't be head to head, but we want to make sure that both
40 тысяч
are going
магов
to be able
пак,
to see their runs
кошмар.
through to completion. So we'll be watching Golden Guardians complete their run, and then our admins will be monitoring Gargoyle Stream's run as well, and we'll be able to see who moves on from there. So we'll watch the rest of our Golden Guardians game right here, and then be moving on to the next series afterwards.
All right, well, unfortunate that we see this
Там
match
что-то
happen
сказали,
again
что
for Gargoyles, but,
нет никакой
definitely
инфы
a good
адекватной
decision.
от
So
челиков.
Golden Guardians did not encounter the same
Потому
thing,
что
so
там
they
стрим
just,
то ли упал, то ли еще что-то
barely
такое.
managed to finish off this
Я
dungeon here, and
прослушал
we're gonna watch
половину.
them.
Суть в
They're
том,
having a
что
really good run so far,
чтобы
right?
продолжить,
I mean, it's
нужно
gonna be
будет
hard
посмотреть
for
их игру.
Gargoyles
Ну,
to
типа с
beat
какой
that
таймер у них.
time off stream once
И
they,
потом
do
можно будет
their
ехать
key,
дальше.
but
Короче,
looking at
перерыв
Golden
долгий
Guardians,
будет.
this is going to be incredibly hard to beat as they have a perfect run here, right? We have the zero deaths. They
Всё
spawned
скорее.
that 4th pride now. We're up to 81% trash, so they only have to do the last boss. And maybe they do the last boss with the pride, as you mentioned before, but doesn't look like it because there's still some trash in between, unless they somehow want to skip this one. It's possible that they also pull some trash on
Тогда
top
да,
of the
можно,
boss,
кстати,
right?
да.
That might be a thing,
Перепрыгнуть
considering that they
водичку.
have the pride buff
Или
here.
там на
And
дерево
they also
упасть.
have Bloodlust available, so let's see what they gather up here as Lighty is just running through the trash pack, and looks like they are pulling the boss indeed, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it is a good, impressive run from Golden Guardians in terms of how they've handled these pulls, but there is quite a bit of time available for Gargoyle. If Gargoyle can avoid having those 2 maze mishaps that happened to Golden Guardians, that could save them quite a bit of time.
Starfire,
Golden Guardians getting
Starfire.
back to the start of the maze.
Как же он
twice in this
разваливает.
dungeon.
Starfire,
That's probably cost them almost
Starfire.
a minute if you add those 2 together.
Гнев,
And
гнев,
that is something that
гнев,
Gargoyle may be
гнев.
able to capitalize
Блин,
on,
как же
in
круто
their
на
run,
сове
which
играть.
they will do later, again off broadcast, just to make sure that everything is all fair here between the 2 teams.
Yeah, looks like Golden Guardians are doing a good job finishing off this trash as well, as they're now fighting Tredova only. Tredova can be a difficult boss, but got nerfed quite a
Уже иду сову качать.
from beta. So at this point, not as difficult
Просто
anymore.
2
as it
кнопки
used
на
to
панели
be,
у
for
человека.
sure.
On beta, it would predict your movement, so it would like start the swirly cast, and then you'd
Я
have to
типа
start
ради
running,
интереса все время
and then it would,
смотрел
like,
всю инсту за
put
ним,
one where
зачем его
you
взяли.
would be in 2 seconds if you kept running that same direction. So you had to, like,
А он
juke it
типа с 2
and
кнопками
adjust your run in the
8000
middle,
ДПСов
to
пак
avoid it.
выдает.
But
Тут ты меня и осенило.
new predictive thing where it just kind of sends them out in all directions at run speed, so you can't just run.
Кому-то на маге там нужно менеджить спылы,
As far as I'm
тайминги
aware, it
высчитывать,
actually,
еще
remembers
что-то
how you
придумывать.
dodged it the last time and will put a swirly there, right? So
Сова рядом
if,
такая
the
пробегает.
swirly spawns
Starfire,
underneath you and you dodge
Starfire,
to the left,
Starfire.
then the next time one swirly will spawn underneath you and to the left of you, because that's how you dodged it the last time. So it will remember the way you dodged. Meaning that if you're running really far away from it, then the swirlies will spawn out over all of the room. But if you only make 1 step to the side or 1 step in the front, then the swirlies will all be much more contained, and that's actually a much better strategy. Instead of mages having just blink around all over the place, and then their swirlies are just going to be covering other people's areas. So definitely an interesting ability for sure, even though it was a lot harder when it was invisible. But yeah, now we see the swirly, so easier to dodge for sure, as Tredova is down to 7%.
Я считаю свои
at this
кнопки
point.
сейчас на
They
ДК.
still have to play some trash after this. It's not going to be over.
Там
They still need
получается
that
эпидемия,
13% trash that
талантовая.
is missing for them. And if we look at the time, I mean, above 20 minutes, and we saw some of the strategy from Das Gargoyle
Раз,
stream.
два,
Of course, we
три.
can't see
the whole dungeon that they've
4,
been playing,
5,
since they will be
6,
doing this off
7,
stream. Hopefully, just
8,
because, of course, they had the bugs, so we couldn't see
Купол
their dungeon
9,
run. But it is going to
Поступ
be difficult for them to
10,
beat this time that Golden Guardians is setting here.
Зеленка
It seems incredibly clean on their
11,
side.
Yeah, this is going to
Армия
be an
мертвых
impressive
вот
timer
это
coming out from Golden Guardians,
12,
although I expect we will be seeing faster mist runs in the future. I think this is going to be one of the
Ковенантская
get sub 20 minutes
13,
at some point, as 5% more count actually needed here for Golden Guardians.
Грипнуть
Although maybe
моба
they got it from their tier 9 villagers. Of course,
14,
as we mentioned,
Yeah.
типа
sometimes those tier 9
душка там
villagers aren't
моба
getting
еще
count,
и
so yeah,
стан
that's probably what's going to stop our
15.
timer there, is actually once they reach the 95% count, plus those 2 tier 9 villagers that they killed right at the start, is 100, and so they are done with the dungeon. We don't know who won the series yet, though. We have to wait and see what time Gargoyle is able to put up.
Что
Luckily,
в голос, конечно, с этой серии Best of 3-шной. Сначала инста забагалась, по-моему, еще какая-то хрень произошла. Пять кнопок. Хорошо, смотри. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ну ладно, без КДшек ты имеешь в виду? Денчик. Типа без КДшек каких? 2 минуток? Не, ну смотри, у меня, типа, да, например, вот, типа 30 секунд, минута, КД. Но это все равно ты всегда пожимаешь. Ну хз, типа суть в том, что у кого-то и этого нету. Плюс у тебя все равно должно быть очень много полезных обилок, которые ты нажимаешь. Ну, то есть у совы тоже, да, там типа есть рез, БР, формы меняет сова. Бегает. Я просто зарофлил с того, как чувак именно ходил. Я просто зарофлил с того, как чувак стоял, лупил. Типа 2 кнопками просто. Так-то понятно, что у всех типа очень много утилити кнопок, и сова не исключение из-за того, что там формы, вот это все. 5, 10. Я просто скорее зарофлил просто с геймплея. Так, ну там скоро next серия начнется хотя бы, и то неплохо. Не будет долгого перерыва.
О, подмастерье. Нам отчаянно не хватает слизи. Не поможешь нам с...
Нам отчаянно не хватает слизи.
А как ты служишь Марграфине?
Первый поворот. Да не, вообще у любого персонажа должно быть... Ну, типа WoW такая игра, что у тебя как минимум все равно с утилити на панели где-то кнопок 15 будет. Это минимум. Ну, точнее, не так, это некорректно немного, потому что там у кого-то вон формы, у кого-то еще что-то. Но именно нажимных будет 15 кнопок минимум с утилити. Блин, эту хрень нажимать надо, да? Тю-рю-тю-рю-рю. Первый поворот. Стрим MDI, ждем следующую игру.
Где стрим MDI?
Че из пояса его вылез? Пиздос. Мы тут MDI вообще-то смотрим. В перерывах квестики делаем. Как дела, Купон? Тут сейчас сова показывала твой геймплей, кстати. Нет. А я не знаю, кстати, какой никнейм был у совы. Чат, кто-то помнит, какой совы никнейм был? А, я сейчас на сайте могу глянуть. Сейчас скажите.
Ушел, пришел, а тут душнердота опять пришел.
В смысле душнер Дота? Это кто? Купон может только себя задушить. Так. А, тут не напишет никнейм, да? Или напишет, сейчас разберусь. View bracket. Йодаринга играл. Чувак с ником. Йода, короче, какой-то. У него потом приставки просто к никнейму идут. Дальше. Знаешь сову с ником Йода? Джедай, джедай. Да он ничего специфичного на роге не делал, на самом деле. Он просто собирал все вот эти сферки, копья. Поэтому у него ДПС такой лютый был. Блин, купон богатый, жесть стал, походу. Тортики хавает постоянно, KFC заказывает. Нефтяной магнат скоро вернется. Не, MDI еще не закончился. Прошло 2 игры только. А в перерывах ничего неинтересного не происходит, поэтому... Я бегаю, квестики делаю на заднем фоне и все. Ну, вообще прикольно, кстати. Приехал Рога 1 раз. 2 раза сова. В первой Best of 3 вообще не было хантов. Сейчас типа хант был. Так что, может, люди что-то попридумывают интересное. Сейчас придет БМ хант или Сурф. Прикиньте, Сурф пойдет хуярить с двуручкой. Что начнется? Ох. Было, что будет не в счет. Кому как не нам бесконечно везет. Музычки не хватает, конечно. Что-то будет найти. Так, чем можно заняться? Я хотел генералов убить в нормале. Глядишь, Теренкава упадет. Может, есть? Кто-то ищет. Пойдем быстренько генералов трахнем. Нет, я не занимаюсь всей этой дрочкой в Вове с репутациями и со всем остальным. Для меня это слишком тяжко. Сурф, Ферау, Энг. На самом деле, протовар, вот ты рофлишь, а протовар очень годный. Как и Холли Прист. Ну, не для ключей, возможно. Но я видел, кстати, вары закрывают ключи тоже высокие. Ну чё, засумоните, давайте быстро генералов убьем. Там MDI скоро стартанет next. А, там еще чистят инсту. Ну, этот. Перед генералами мобов они... Я побежал тогда на полетку. Кому как и не нам бесконечно везет. А у челика как кот на стрим пришел в наглую. Что-то двери ходят, открывает, они с этого поржали и закрыли. Не, даже ничего интересного не показали. Да, Макс, да, мне это не нужно. Зачем мне это?
Говори громче, солдат. Слаб.
Просто в своё удовольствие играю. Типа качать репу ради того, чтобы там, типа, дырку сделать в шмотки и увеличить свои статы на целых 7 основную или на 16 второстепенную.
Го на акважеско теку. Чем мы тут бегаем просто так, блудтрель?
Как же покс вообще? Это что такое? Ну, я лечу, меня не сумонят люди. Придется лететь самому. Ну чё, на засумоньте. Как вы, дискотека такая есть? О. Поехали, таймер пул. Челика 15 ключи, все в тайм закрыто. Вообще големчик прикольный такой. Так, ну старта там нет пока. В принципе, генерал в обычке очень быстро убивается. Я хочу попробовать, может, тренька хоть упадет. Сегодня с утреца без стрима, когда делать нечего было, убил в 2 натрия. Ни хрена не упало в нормале опять. Завтра пойдем куда? Хочешь на этого, Денчик? На Динатрию? Блин, я не знаю. Я на самом деле не уверен, что у меня вар потянет. Ну, типа, я могу людей собрать, спросить. Типа, там, как обычно, Олю, Локти, всех-всех-всех. Шакена там. Но у меня такой вар, что, типа, я приду и на грязи шмяки, в принципе, пойду первую тычку сделаю на чарже, чтобы цепи не порвать никого. Ну, или что-то типа того. И на этом, собственно, все. Надо подумать, типа, чего. Ну, там варом надо ключи ходить. А типа, чтобы в ключи попасть на ДД, это нужна своя пачка в теории. Кому как не нам. Первое это будет плага Fall. Усиленный босс, рейдж и взрыв сферки. Второе это чертоги покаяния. Опять усиленные боссы. Моб вот этот желтенький. И некротик. Ёпт. Третий театр боли, усиленные мобы. Ну давайте пул уже. Я сейчас ливану иначе. Входи с чатом. Кстати, да, можно. Вообще это нормальная тема. Я что-то даже не подумал на самом деле об этом. С чатом включу. Это без рофов, если что.
Разбей шмотки блутрея.
Здесь шмотки фармятся дольше, чем в доте. Здесь плохая идея шмот разбивать. Огненные просторы, это что? Принесите мне аниме героя. Коридоры в Таргасте. Я закрыл так первый этаж и ливанул оттуда. Чисто на компанию сделал. Сюжетную. Чтобы типа ролики посмотреть с этим... Как его зовут-то? С Эдуином. Тогда мне на самом деле все равно на Рио. Мне скорее важен это у людей. Ну потому что типа все эти вещи против мобов, грубо говоря, они ну, типа фиксится коммуникация. Если ты примерно понимаешь, что делать на боссах, и там типа обычно, ну, в большинстве своем в ключах должен шарить танк. Потому что танк строит большинство маршрутов. Типа, если на танке задр, там остальным почти делать ничего не надо. Не в высоких ключах, я имею в виду. Типа, мне на аварии выше 7-го ключа нет смысла идти пока, я думаю. Ну как, типа, есть смысл, да, шмот, но мы не закроем просто. Потому что это якорь будет. Там еще и стартанули даже. Кому как не нам без... А, блин, я почиститься забыл. Ну ладно.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Как-нибудь будет. Ну так вот, да.
Four, three, two, one.
Берегитесь.
4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1.
Можно будет брать людей из чата, кто захочет. Хотя, ну, типа, плюс-минус адекватным этому левелом и ходить ключики. Нормальная тема, кстати.
Берегите.
И стартанули. Что недолго. Я почти босс убил. Фиг с духами, ну, такое. Может быть хуже, так сказать. О, там чел 2 вынес. Как он это сделал и не сдох.
Берегитесь.
4, 3, 2, 1.
2, 2, 1. Босс лагает. Типа этот аффикс с духами, он очень хорошо контрится обилками определенными. И все. Будь ты милишник или рожевик, все равно. На самом деле. 35 голды, я понял. Thanks for donation. Так.
That's the healer and his angels.
That's so sweet. Let's get into it. Game number 1. Starting
О,
out
сейчас будет.
Perplexed versus P2.
Сейчас усиленные боссы, кстати, будут.
Alright,
Ой.
well, Plaguefall, we did see it earlier, as we already mentioned before. It was Echo playing versus Quad question mark.
Сейчас
And now
Скризгл
we see
трахнет
Perplexed
всех.
versus P2's Angels. We see already a very different comp. We do see the Disc Priest,
Купон, тут MDI. Ты где,
DK,
купон?
Mage plus Windwalker for Perplexed, which is a very similar comp we saw before. But on the other side, P2's Angels playing the Moonkin and playing the Holy Paladin as well.
Yeah, if you caught that, Divine actually ended up grabbing 2 random mushrooms before he entered into that walkway, dismounting a lot earlier than the rest of his team before getting this pull started. Perplex's pull here is absolutely massive and really scary. A nice ring of peace coming out to be able to mitigate the tank damage here, especially on that.
Я не могу пока
really dangerous.
понять, кто у них справа, пока не приблизился.
So having deaths, the tank does end up dying. Now the trash pack is reset.
Воу.
Yeah, it looked like they had
Чего
some issues
справа
with
ты
the
ехали?
raging affix basically. They had a huge pull at the start.
Интересный сетап справа.
And they just didn't manage to keep them alive.
Чуваки
Shoda
просто
went
ставили,
down,
да?
P2
Там
there,
сова.
and the team is named after
Holy
went down,
Pal
and then
хилит.
they just fell apart. We see Ryzen going
Макс,
down as well, and
Макс,
Wolf is
сова
on
и
Perplexed
монах.
side, so they having issues too. They're single
А
resting.
здесь что?
Thankfully,
Здесь
they have single
ДК.
rests available. They have the Windwalker
А,
who
ну вот,
can
кстати,
do this out of
слева...
combat rest. Otherwise, they might have had to,
Слева то,
commit
чем
another rest
Эхо
here, but
играли.
they do have this out of combat rest.
1 в 1.
And yeah, I think they just didn't manage to get the Shadow Melt off properly there, right?
ДК, маг,
Correct.
монах,
Yeah, they were having
ДЦ
issues with the
и
Shadow Meld.
ДХ.
Yeah, exactly. And on the side of P2's Angels, now they're looking to play all of these slimes that are in the Glob Grog area. So interestingly enough, we saw Perplexed run their Bloodlust on the first pull, and then P2's Angels had issues with that first trash pack, but they were holding on to their Bloodlust. So I think that may have been what was really, really scary for them. Now P2's Angels is... I think I would say that they're taking a little bit more of a live route approach. trying to play the slimes, then playing these plague belchers, just going a little bit slower. Whereas
Склизгу их
Perplex is now
скиплю.
grabbing some of these plague boars, and they're actually pulling it
Ну,
straight
там
into Glob.
прочь пошла
Okay, so the
жара.
plague boars do some initial damage on hit, but the big damage from the plague boars is actually from the dot that they do end up applying. They look like they have 4 of those plague boars on top of him, so they're going to have them all explode on top of him, and the dot,
Ой, кстати.
it doesn't stack from what I
Ой, вот это
understand.
круто.
So the boss's health is going to drop pretty rapidly due to the plague boar dot, but like if they were looking for the most balanced amount of damage, then they would have tried to kill those one at a time, I think. But instead,
70% хп сняли боссу.
it's really good, especially on
Видели
crucifix sets,
обоз?
to make sure that they are trying to get the boss down before he ends up having a bunch of those ads end up spawning before you get too many of the stomps, because you do have the slimy morsels like you see on screen here coming in.
Они типа привели слизняков, которые взрываются, а у Еш это очень сильно.
Я не понял,
Ядом.
взорвали склизгу?
Да, да. И склизгу взорвали, склизгу. Живи, склизг.
Because of the explosive affix. If you're unlucky and you get 10 or more explosives spawn at the same time, you just don't have enough time to kill them all, and it's just incredibly dangerous. So that might be.
Блин, я думал, сейчас тут будет мемные какие-то ситуации, все будут 1000 лет склизгу убить. А чё вы просто склизгу взорвали? Да, конечно.
Because for P2s, it looked like they had just basically their Moonkin and Kiltus and Kashota killing a lot of the explosives that were ended up spawning. Well, Perplexed is probably just going to have their healer end up purge the Wicked Echoes as much as possible. Maybe Divine ends up throwing some damage into them as well. Now you do see the Ring of Peace coming out on the
Нет, ну вообще, кстати, это жестко.
The Plague Belcher does end up getting pulled as well.
Ебать, там слизь под анрейджа.
Quite scary, I will admit.
I really wonder why they played it this way. Like, so they basically ended up skipping first,
18-й ключ.
and then coming back doing the trash, which is.
18-й ключ тираника, то есть усиленные боссы.
I really wonder what's the point. Maybe it's cool.
И там склизгл просто сгнил на 70% хп. Охренеть.
They wanted to do the boss, and then they come back for the trash after. But definitely interesting because it feels like these plague belchers is really something that might not be as efficient because it's a single mob. It has a lot of HP. You get these tiny slimes, which are annoying to deal with. So interesting. They're going even further back now, doing even more trash in the back.
Kind of taking a detour.
That's a lot of backtracking, right? Yeah. Yes, interesting.
I've never pulled these hornets. I don't really know. I'll be honest, I don't know what they do. MDI commentator, not knowing what the hornets in Flakefall do. Now they do door of shadows away and are melding off that
они
pride,
типа тень вызвали здесь, чтобы она не появилась где-то в жопе мира.
Again, doesn't really explain necessarily why they're doing the boss first and then the trash after.
Yeah.
Still might just be cooldown timing. Like, it's very possible that they just have some cooldowns that just line up better there. Now it looks like they're pulling a Plague Rock as well, which they deal with the bombs on the ground. They want to make sure they get the debuff on the Plague Rock. And yeah, just a very interesting route coming out of Perplexed.
Блин, прикольные челики. Они типа всю инсту взрывают их же бомбами, всем этим дерьмом. Сначала склизгу взорвали, сейчас Руха взорвали.
Dealing with this trash at the start is going to save them a lot of time later by skipping trash that might be less efficient to play. We'll see what they decide to do here.
P2's is so since they did have those issues at the beginning, they started to play more of a live
Там
route
сова хуярит. Starfire.
Second part of the dungeon.
Сосает склизгу.
So now they
Это месть купона.
Now they're making their way towards the Plague Boar area, and they're looking to bomb some of the trash. While on the side of Perplexed, they have ended up on this ledge, which was heavily used during M0 week to be able to skip a lot of the tentacles before there were more tentacles added. So now they are running their way into that tentacle area, going to get the mini boss to start spawning the Plague Boars, and I suspect that they're going to start bombing and maybe potentially back pulling some more trash as these Plague Boars are probably the most efficient mobs in any dungeon because you can get them spawning infinitely. They do damage for you. Look at that. Okay, so
Взорвали.
there's a paralysis on that slime tentacle. You do see a shine
Щупальцу
there,
взорвали.
plague boar, having it
За что вы так
explode on the slime
щупальцей?
tentacle. At that point, all you have to do is make
hit,
sure that it
right?
gets interrupted. Yep, all you have to do is interrupt it, and you should be good to go. And
But I think the triangle didn't get hit. I think they missed it slightly. So I think the strategy was really good, but they just slightly got the explosion too far away from the triangle tentacle. So not very efficient to get to miss
Ничего
the
не понял,
bomb,
они
basically. But they still
скипнули
managed to get it down. And they're
Мобай,
now
или они его
past
как-то
the
привели
mid-mob, it
под
seems
это все
like. So
взорвали?
actually, the complete opposite strategy of what we saw Echo do earlier. We saw Echo skip the tentacles and do the
Так, ну
mini-boss.
тут 3 пака,
But
как и
they actually had
все.
a full wipe, or almost a full wipe there. And we see Perplex do the tentacles, but then skip the mini-boss. So, complete opposite strategies here. As they come in, pull all of the trash together here. They
Как
did
все на
see
этом
the
месте
congealed
делали.
slime, which is interesting because the congealed slime actually, as far as I'm aware, the debuff from the plague borers, the explosion dot, does not get affected by the damage reduction from the slime. So you can actually pull it on top, but they didn't actually kill it with the plague borers, they just randomly AoE'd it down.
Монах
so that
сдох.
explains it.
Это локоть, что ли?
So now they've melded off the pride, but the pride is in the middle of the room.
Локоть
where the
отъехал.
boss is. They're
Локоть,
running
вставай,
swag. It
братишка.
looks like now they're going to pull the mini boss. Are they going to pull the boars into the mini boss or into the pride? Like that's the only thing that makes reasonable sense to me. All right, so yeah, look at this. The pride has been pulled. Now they're going to grab the plague boars and
они
make sure that it
ведут.
explodes on the pride plus the mini boss here, and it will end up just like killing both of those mobs very rapidly as long as the tank is able to survive.
Они позвали моба красного под взрыв тоже.
Ashine going down, unfortunately. They do have a battle rest available, but Ashine is the DK with the instant battle rest, so they might just finish off this pull and then.
Да не, ну тут
rest
типа
and
челики
back
очень
up.
жесткие какие-то.
So
На самом деле.
like, yeah, there's a lot of
Они
backtracking,
красиво
and
очень
here's
склизко
one thing, right?
взорвали.
When it comes to the MDI, we've seen so many teams come up
слизь
with
собирают,
incredibly fancy
поехали.
strategies where they go back, they see this, they use this ability, they jump over there, they, just like incredibly fancy things, and it looks really cool when they pull it off. Or we have this like fear sigil in Siege of Borealis where they just added like everything up and then just AoE'd it down, and it looks fancy and it looks cool and it's really nice for them to pull it off. But sometimes it's just not faster.
Я уже
Because
хочу
they-
посмотреть,
a lot of
как
time
это
you need to
челики.
set it up.
Ну, типа, кто посмотрит
It's just
MDI,
not made
типа,
up by
в
the time you
Америке
save
же
for
и
pulling
Европе
it
очень
off.
популярный
So
WoW.
sometimes just
Yeah.
pressing W and going through the dungeon is
И
faster than setting up
все
some
пойдут
insane pull,
пробовать,
where you have to backtrack a
типа,
bunch,
учиться
and
делать
you
то,
have
что
to
делают
set
на
up some
MDI.
CC
Там
here
столько
and there,
рофлов
right? So
будет.
we will see
Exactly.
how fast they
Ну,
are
потому
at the
что
end,
пока ты
but, yeah,
учишься вот
that's a
это
lot
все
of
делать,
running
плюс здесь
backwards.
командная работа, помимо того,
You're
что
absolutely right. That is
нужно
a
в
ton of
соло
backtracking.
исполнение
It's impossible
хорошее.
for myself or
Там
for
такой
you, definitely,
пиздец
like, it's
будет.
definitely
Ой.
impossible for myself to even know, like, is this faster? Is this plague boar strategy
кстати,
even
бомбу
better
не
than
бьют.
what they could have potentially done? Do you think it's faster?
Как же
I
им
feel like
похуй
it's-
на
I feel like it's
бомбу.
I'm
not
not sure.
at a
It's really
glance.
hard to tell.
Алло, вы в
Yes,
курсе,
it's
как
really
она
hard to tell
работает?
because the debuff definitely does a lot of damage, right? The plague borer debuff, but the backtracking, it's hard to tell how much time you lose from it. I assume they
Are they letting the
tested
bomb go
this.
off?
Понял?
Yeah, it looks like they're just out healing
Жесть.
it. I
Failure
like this
AMC'd
strat.
it.
Yeah, they just AMZ
like that.
barrier.
Что-то в
things,
голос.
I like this. This is actually a really this is efficient for sure. Like that's
That is
one of
good,
the
yeah.
most efficient things you can do. Yeah, you're basically just saving the
Балансненько.
damage that you needed to do on the blob. By just
Купол
using a bunch of
ДК
defenses
плюс
that you don't
купол
need to
ДЦ.
use otherwise
Как
anyways,
же
right?
нам бокс
Because
на
they skip a bunch of pride
бомбу?
buffs and they don't need any AoE cities like that. So I think this is a good strategy.
Да я
to
говорю,
be
это
pulling
какие-то
off
вообще
here.
машины
Looks
без
like they're also
крыши.
ignoring this last bomb. Not sure if they can pull this off though. They might have to kill the boss before it goes off, but it looks like they have enough damage. The boss is already at 5%.
Yeah.
Bomb is not about to go off, so they definitely can beat the timer here.
Well, so the upside of letting the bomb go
Блядь,
off.
жесть
on
какие-то,
platforms, you literally
вообще
had to commit
лютые
zero
челы.
offensive cooldowns to the bomb.
Yeah.
So then you had like Swag and Wolf Disco.
Как их
like,
переиграть?
having some bust, and I did see Swag touch a death the boss. Obviously, he didn't commit Zwin or SEF, but you do have more offensive CDs to be able to burn the boss there. That felt efficient. That felt like really fast in terms of like what they're doing.
Жесть
Now
какая.
they're doing the island pack, which I would say that this is a
Не, ну
pretty
они
stable
реально
pull
очень
for
много
those
времени
who might
выиграли.
go
Я
for
хз,
it.
как-то их вот переиграть можно на
Yeah,
этой
definitely.
инсте.
that's really something we see on live a lot.
Челики взорвали
Now,
первого
these
босса,
maps, though, they're a
взорвали
little bit
кучу
deceiving, right?
паков
Because when you pull them,
перед
they're already like
вторым.
incredibly low
Второго
HP, so it
босса
looks like, oh,
скипнули
this is
две
an easy pack,
бомбы.
they're already low. But all of these maps are incredibly dangerous, and you have such little space as well on this platform. You can see this goo spawning all over the place, which can cause lots of issues, but no problem for Perplex. As they're finishing off the pool, moving on to this third
Снова
boss room
предыдущий
now.
очень пах, ну,
Of course, Perplex
красавчики.
quite a bit ahead after the initial mistakes that P2 had on their pool. P2 just now engaging that second boss, so
Yeah.
a huge time difference here at this point. It's
Ну,
one
а почему
whole
сейчас
boss
был?
difference plus 15% trash in favor of Perplex. But as we mentioned
У
before,
вас же
P2's
еще почти,
Angels,
ну, типа босс, а
they
босс
were the number
усиленный.
9 seed in time trials coming into this tournament, so they theoretically wouldn't have qualified. But because the number 7 seed didn't manage to compete, we did basically just get P2's Angels in. And they only got this message later than all the other teams, so they didn't manage to practice as much as all the other teams for this tournament, unfortunately, because of this late swap in.
Охренеть, на
That's
самом
why
деле.
you can't really say that P2's Angels are doing a bad job, because they only had this initial wipe, and otherwise they're doing just
Ну,
fine, right? Of course, they're not
там
as
их убивают
fast,
по частям.
but they're playing clean after that one mistake that they had
Обычно,
on
да.
that
Там
first
слишком мерзкие
Yeah,
мобы.
and I mean, for their first pull, like if they're able to pull that off, I would expect them to be in a similar spot as Perplexed in the dungeon, because they literally lost 20%
Ну,
of
здесь,
their trash,
ну, блин,
in the first
люди,
pull,
грубо
and then
говоря, живут этой
I've
игрой.
kind of resorted to playing more of like a
Они
live
типа
key
нон-стоп уже
route
живут в
through
ней.
the rest of the dungeon, which there's nothing wrong with it. This dungeon is so volatile and difficult
Сидишь,
to deal with
тестишь кучу
that
всего.
playing safe in here is definitely a reasonable strategy.
Как люди в других играх какие-то фишки придумывают, все остальное.
Definitely.
Для них это
We do
уже,
see them
мягко
just
говоря,
finishing
больше,
off the
чем
boss here.
игра.
The boss jumps through the last time.
Вот и все.
Let's see if they can also make the damage here before they have to kill a bomb. But Perplexed already on Venom Blade, so already engaging that third boss. They did kill the trash around it, so they're up to 86% now.
Yep.
That is enough trash, so they can, after this, they can go down to the last boss's area. There will be enough trash there, so they don't have to do anything else after this, and can just move down. This boss can be decently difficult, but really shouldn't be a problem for them.
Не, у тебя очень плоское мышление. Просто 1000 ранов в одной институте ничего не дают. Ты можешь бегать все эти 1000 попыток одним и тем же маршрутом, ничего не изменится. Тут именно должно работать... Типа ум должен работать, должно быть желание, интерес, чтобы пробовать так, сяк, по-другому, что-то придумывать самому, что-то в голову приходило. Это не механические... Блин. Короче, тот, кто никогда не горел таким желанием, не поймет, о чем речь.
So Perplex doing a really good job. You see their offensive CDs being used right here. Wolf Disco was in this combustion.
Я тут просто по своему опыту говорю, когда ты сидишь в доте, например, когда ты задрачиваешь нее там с командой, вы постоянно что-то придумываете, вместе тренируетесь, ну, грубо говоря, грейдитесь вместе. Выходит патч, ты сидишь просто в лобби по 20 часов, потому что вам интересно, что выходило, куда можно новые варлды поставить, какие новые приколюшки можно придумать и все остальное.
Priest actually cannot dispel poison, right? And this boss does apply quite a few of poisons. Also, this whole dungeon has a lot of poison effects. So that's something the priest can't do. Something you need to keep in mind. But they're just fine as they now finish up the boss. They're jumping down to the last area. And we've seen some spicy pulls in this last area from the other groups, from Echo, for example. And probably expect to see the same thing for Perplex as well.
Да, но тут
Even though they have two
легко для
melee,
чего. Первая
but I
карта.
think Wolf Disco is just fine to finish off those ranged mobs himself, because it's incredibly easy to get aggro from those mobs because they cannot be melee tanked by Divine Field.
I love just pulling these as a ranged DPS and knowing that I have a threat on me and then just kiting them around, not not worrying about the tank having to deal with them. Look at what P2's is actually end up pull. If you see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, they end up having like this landing pole with all these defenders.
А ты тут, этот, сервал? Костян, ты живой?
Pretty atypical pull, but it looked like they probably just needed some more trash count before going downstairs, because they still haven't done Domina yet, but
Нужны экспертное мнение про магов.
Yeah, I think just getting a little bit extra count here is
Я
totally
смотрю,
fine.
тут
This
постоянно
Pride is
чуваки
something that I've
нажимают
seen pulled
под
a decent amount of
камбурст
times already, and they're also low HP because they fight
ковенантскую
each
обилку
other,
зачем-то.
so definitely saving a little bit of damage there by fighting them as they're low. Now we do see Perplex finishing
Типа
off
он
his last remaining boss here,
раскастовывается,
Icar.
пару
They don't have a
пиробластов, и потом
raging
обилку
dispel in their group,
ковенантскую
as I
жмет.
mentioned before. None of those classes
Ну,
can
либо там
dispel this
пару
off, so they want to
заливок
make sure
в
they're
ОЕшку
interrupting
и
all of the casts
опять
to
же
not get any
обилка
of those raging casts
ковенантская.
off. And now we saw them position
Когда камбурст
at
еще
the
не
entrance
кончился.
because the Pride mob spawns in proximity to one random player in your group. That's why everyone jumped to the entrance, spawned the Pride mob, then jumped to the boss and shadow melt off the aggro here.
Взрыв во
So
время камбаста — это
very
типа когда
efficient
каз
by
заканчивается
Perplex
ковенантской
here.
обилки?
Just because dealing with the Pride mob, specifically for this boss, is incredibly inefficient because this boss just goes down into intermission phase and is unattackable. So you're basically just wasting the Pride buff for quite a while here at the start. So definitely not worth to deal with the Pride here if you can somehow dodge it. And that's what they did with that Shadow Melt.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of ways of being able to remove disease dispel, whether it be from the Windwalker dispel.
Да, жестко. Тут чуваки на одного босса просто обгоняют.
Yes, they can, yeah. They can't.
Okay,
the only thing they can't do is poison,
the,
right? I think.
Yeah. I think
and
that's right.
curse.
Yes, they can remove.
Блин. Я хочу посмотреть, чтобы щупальца кого-то прихлопнуло. Ну, здесь такая что хоть будет.
Poison and curse.
Yeah, but then they also have like Kyrian files and stuff like that to be able to remove some of the diseases on Margrave. So they need to make sure that they
Взрыв можно во время каста делать, в смысле? Типа который столб огня, ты имеешь в виду взрыв? Или какой?
This fight can get a little bit scary during Tyrannical because you can get a bunch of sets of this Infectious Rain coming out. You do see the power word barrier.
То есть ты типа во время обилки можешь кастовать еще и АОЕшку?
Just allowing everybody to like require very little amounts of healing. Now they have two
огненный взрыв, я понял. Который бласт. Стопроцентный крит.
Cast, but it looks like they just don't have enough offensive CDs for it. So now Divine's going to end up having to tank that up. And I think that they're going to just commit all of their damage to the boss. Getting another Infectious Rain, this is going to be rough to heal during the intermission.
Да, я понял. То есть ты там в камбурсте швыряешься, если у тебя где-то что-то не прокает, нажимаешь... Или под конец, когда заряда кончается, нажимаешь ковенантскую обилку, пару взрывов, чтобы настакать все криты опять, и кайфуешь.
Thankfully, it spawned right next to the position where they were in. But if you would have spawned further away, then Divine Field would have needed to get there to soak the touch in front and couldn't have tanked the other mobs. So definitely it was decently dangerous for them to not finish off the ad. But thankfully they did get a good spawn and they did manage to recover. And now they're popping all of those cooldowns at the very end to make sure the boss goes down. This last phase is the most dangerous one because you get the tentacles at the same time as having to fight the boss. But no problem for Perplex as they finish up the boss and win this first game versus P2's Angels 1-0.
That's right, Perplex still showing
Для
how
чуваков.
strong they've been for such a...
На первой карте прям вообще размотали. Бесшансовочка. Ну там жесткие челики, блин, они бедного Склизгого просто трахнули. Можно на варе пока побегать до мапы второй. Блин, реально бедный Склизгл. Как же его размазало. Надо подумать, где можно на варе шмот мне халявный намашнить быстро. Ну, кроме ключей, на самом деле, ничего и нету, да? И Денчик говорил, какая-то инста еще есть. Я захожу, что, поиск рейда классические? Мне нужны огненные просторы, правильно? Что значит ТВ? Это типа выходные, тайм-вик или как это расшифровывается? Кому как не нам бесконечно везет. Но меня никуда не возьмут с таким этим вэллом. На самом деле. Конечно, много всего надо поменять еще. Огненные просторы — это рейд. И типа на выходных из-за катаклизма, насколько я понимаю, открывается пара инстов плюс рейд. Генерал на 29-м открывается. Кому как не нам бесконечно. Можно пока порофлить торгас сходить, конечно. Типа торгас все равно закрывать на этом персонаже. О, меня кого-то взяли. Отлично. Я не знаю, где это находится. А, я понял, где это инста. Кому как не нам бесконечно везет. Надо, чтобы кто-то засумонил, я так понимаю, нас. Там 2 человека есть, отлично. Так. Следующий инста, кстати, будет чертоги покаяния. С тираникой тоже. Но это легко будет, на самом деле. Потому что боссы в чертогах покаяния фришные. Там сложно именно трэш. Паки мобов, вот это все. Босс там кто может быть сложный? 3-й может напрячь. И все. Типа их боль послужит вам уроком. Вот это вот. Потому что там дух, ну типа долго, и духи дамажат постоянно уешка. Долго очень убивать. Камень, по идее, фри, он просто засирает там. Чуть-чуть отходите и все. 2-й халявка с горгульями. 4-й тоже АФК босс. Я пытаюсь один просто прорваться просторы. А, да я вижу, тут Денчик уже сидит. Старфайр наготове, я надеюсь. С гневом. Last time can go. Блин, ну я, наверное, успею одного босса только посмотреть. Дальше пойдем MDI чекать. Сейчас посмотрим, кстати, там сетку. Там должно быть расписано, сколько матчей сегодня будет. Кому как не нам бесконечно везет. Так. Бла-бла-бла, бла-бла-бла. А где расписание у вас есть? Или вам бокс на расписание? С 22 по 24. Нет, ничего, просто написано кап 1. Все 3 дня без инфы какой-то адекватный. Понял. Блин, у них это Хэллоуин в сете 229 они собирают. Какой же кайф. В 229-х шмотках повоевать. Сколько боссов? Можно же где-то найти, да? Не, рейды нужны. Катаклизм, рейды. Огненные просторы. Что тут за босс вообще? Битали... Лак. Паук какой-то. Големчик. Феникс. Демонюга. Бейлрок я знаю, кстати. Ага. Этого парнишка все знают. Кстати, сейчас мемно сделаем. Я понял, что за огненный простор инста, кстати.
Че качество уменьшить нельзя?
Можно. Здорово, Смайл. Так, вот сюда мне надо. Где у нас этот-то? Облик менять. Сейчас мемную лисичку сделаем. Под Рагнароса. Это величайшая сделка. Пок, у меня фулл сет есть, оказывается. Винтерский. Допустим. Что за меч? Фига себе жесткий меч. Ну мы вот так сейчас сделаем. Ну чё, Рагнарос ебаный. Два молотка. Блин, а там уже мобов первых крутят.
I'm not really sure how he survived there or how he didn't die, but he's somehow alive again. So, Divine going down too, though.
This
is really bad. But there's not many mobs alive at this point, so they can probably finish this off as they're using the Battle Rush on Divine Field, getting him back up to just play it safe, really. These Gargans, they do so much tank damage.
Сорян, Данчик. По растора не идем пока.
And they're just so incredibly scary. And that's probably why Divine Field went down here with all the necrotic stacks, with the Wolf Disco going down, just having the issues with the damage, not managing to finish off the pack basically.
Something I just noticed is Perplex still hasn't elected to use their Bloodlust. It makes me wonder, where is their first Bloodlust supposed to be used?
Yeah.
Because I feel like they've done some
вчера было,
не
знаю, чем так. Сейчас альтабацы выяснять, это такая история.
But they're holding it. I wonder what they're saving it for.
either they do like a really big pull onto the boss, I could think that they maybe are saving the Bloodlust for that one specifically, or they just really know that they're only gonna get a set amount of Bloodlust out anyway. But we know their time trial time, right? And their time trial
40%
time
они
is
набрали
15
тут.
minutes and 5 seconds. That means if they're not gonna Bloodlust very soon, they're not gonna get a second one off. Wolf Disco going down again, unfortunately for Perplex.
Тут чуваки 60% уже набрали. Не убил первого босса. Это они весь трэш, что ли, зачистили? Гаргулью еще притащили.
So now they're also getting the Stoneborn at here to help out with the damage. So this is actually very nice as they have the Stoneborn at just getting mind controlled by the Venthyr, making sure they get the extra damage. And we see Peter's Angels doing an insane, Perplex doing an insane pull here with the boss and everything just pulling on top of each other. This is what they saved the Bloodlust for. So there we go. This is exactly what we were waiting for.
Yeah, but they didn't pull the
Прикольно.
into it. It looks like on the side of P2's Angels.
Типа поставили круг монаха, и мобы не бьют танка, они постоянно стукаются, отлетают.
One good function of the Manifestation of Pride is if you do in fact wipe to it, it doesn't reset to full HP, so you are able to get back in there again and battle it down from 60% in case you need a little bit more time or offensive CDs or whatever to be able to deal with it. So that's a big time loss by P2.
Чуваки вайпнуться еще умудрились. У них проценты больше.
And being able to just like move the boss freely around the room because of all the trash that they've cleared out is quite nice. Now they're electing to pull the Stoneborn in. You do see a shine on the details damage meter. He is Venthyr.
Ну в чате сидит 40 человек. У кого-то качество меняется с 1800. Сейчас я сам этого делать не буду, потому что типа я браузер, окно смотрю, это все убирать придется с одним моником. Нельзя вообще качество менять?
Some teams didn't even play Necrolord at all because they didn't feel like that buff from the blobs is helpful in any way, or maybe not worth it. But here in this dungeon, you definitely see those Venthyrs for the gargoyles because they really help out with the damage. Pretty big time save, specifically for those MDI runs where they do those huge pulls. So definitely wanting that Venthyr. And it looks like they're skipping this Pride. So hopefully they can get the Shadow Melt off properly this time, because we saw them fail that Shadow Melt last time, had to finish up the Pride, even though they didn't want to. And we see Peter's Angels now fighting the first boss as
Типа от меня это вообще не зависит никак.
But yeah, they're just quite a bit
В том плане, что типа качество, ну вот эта херня, функция, со сменой качества, это типа от Твича зависит. Ее нету на каналах, если у тебя нет какого-то количества просмотров, грубо говоря. То есть она была, например, вчера. Это что-то Twitch намудрил опять. Единственное, что я могу попробовать, это ребутнуть трансляцию. Ну, типа, как бы функция там смена качества включить-выключить, у меня такого кнопки нету. То есть с моей стороны я могу максимум это стрим ребутнуть.
I wonder what the players do with that. I wonder if they're going to kill that mob off solo. Okay, that looks like that is correct. They're just going to deal with that mob by itself with the bottom 10-20% of these slashers, and then they're going to make their way onto Echelon. Whereas on P2's side,
они тут сейчас будут ада бить, там чуваки босса добивают. Давай быстро ребутну. Стрим тогда.
Trash count is looking very similar on both sides, though.